Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. It's our DC Spotlight episode for the week of June 8th, 2021. So just a reminder that Rocky and I are going to go through the books. We've read most of the DC books for this week, and we're going to talk with full spoilers, talking about the events, talking about what we thought about the issues. Before we dive into that, I'll just say overall, a pretty strong week. I'm almost fondly thinking back to those weeks where we had only 6 or 7 books to talk about instead of 11 last week, 10 this week. But it's for the most part, it's good stuff. Although I don't feel like it was quite as strong as last week was. I don't know. What did you think, Roggy?
It wasn't. Yeah. Well, last week was a hard one to beat. It was pretty good. This is probably slightly less than last week, but there's a couple that stood out for me. So overall, I'm still. Again, I'm still pleasantly surprised by the quality of what DC's putting out. When I figure how depressed I was leading into Future State and coming out of Future State a little bit, I still remain pleasantly surprised at how DC's managed to, keep us entertained despite a lot of concerns about AT&T takeover and editorial shakeups. So. Fingers are still crossed and things are still going, I think, reasonably well.
Yeah, and I feel like we're not the only ones that are thinking this way. There still seems to be a subset of fandom who's crapping on DC, saying their stuff's not any good, whatever. They're still stuck sort of in the past. But I've seen a lot of creators and a lot of people on social media lately touting DC and specifically Tom Brevoort, across the street at Marvel, metaphorically speaking, talking about how he's just caught up on a bunch of DC stuff, and he feels like the stuff he's been reading lately feels like more of old school DC than their stuff has felt like in a long time. So I sort of agree with what he's saying, and I think a lot of the people that are complaining about DC maybe haven't actually been spending time reading the books because we had plenty of criticism during Future State, but for the most part, I think these books have been really good lately and getting better. So let's go ahead and kick it off with Wonder Woman number 773. So this is written by Michael W. Conrad and Becky Cloonan. Art is by Travis Moore. Colors are by Tamara Bonvillain. Letters by Pat Brousseau. And then there is the backup. We actually got the backup this time, unlike last time. It's written by Jordi Belair, who most people will know as a color artist. The art is by Paulina Ganeschow, colors by Kendall Good, and letters by Becca Carey. So kick us off, Rocky. What did you think of the main story, which is Afterworlds Part 4, and it sort of brings this first chapter of Wonder Woman in the Infinite Frontier era to a close?
Well, overall, I have to say, I think that, co-writers Becky Cloonan and Michael W. Conrad, I think they cheated a little bit here. I think we're being robbed of a story that I was expecting to have a little bit more substance to it in the end. I thought they built a very rich world where they dived us into both Greek mythology, Roman mythology, the idea of the Thor, the gods, the Valkyrie carrying the fallen soldiers into Valhalla, where they can celebrate, but the mystery of why the Valkyrie are gone, and Wonder Woman seeking the Valkyrie and tricking the serpent Nidhogg last issue to gain entrance to the Valkyrie and to find out what's going on and all these battles and this rich character work, good character work that we got of Siegfried, her Wonder Woman's former, or I guess lover / fellow warrior in the early issues, meeting Thor, the beautiful art by Travis Moore. This was really building up to something, and I can't help but be a little bit disappointed with this ending, if I'm brutally honest. And the reason why I'm a little bit disappointed, because it's a little bit of a cheat, and obviously I got to say that there definitely there's going to be a spoiler, some spoilers here, And the reality is that it's revealed that. Actually, before I get that, I just want to give a shout out to these covers, man. The cover, the cardstock cover here is absolutely gorgeous. I don't know, I'm not even sure who draws it. Do you know who that? Just fantastic. And there's a beautiful Pride cover. It is DC Pride Week. We should mention that. And each cover, DC Comics does have a Pride cover. But in any event,
yeah, I'm pretty sure that cardstock covers just based on the art. It looks like Joshua Middleton.
Yeah, actually, I think you're right. It is Joshua Middleton.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous, and it shows Wonder Woman holding Siegfried, who she ultimately ends up doing the having some intimate time with at the end of this issue. It's good to see Wonder Woman get some love during Pride Week, and it's with somebody of the opposite sex, which is a little bit different. But there you go. It's about free love. You can do whoever you like. In any event, this is called Afterworlds Part 4. And this is actually a very well written issue. The dialogue is really good. Where I get a little bit disappointed is that it's ultimately revealed that the Valkyrie they weren't being held captive. They weren't destroyed. They weren't hiding or anything like that. They just quit. The Valkyrie just decided that they quit.
They were tired.
They got tired. Yeah. It's like, I don't know about you, but it was such a disappointment. I thought maybe there's going to be some enemy here, or who is this mysterious figure that was guiding Diane through all this? And of course, we knew last issue was teasing. It's just Dead Man, Boston Brand. And here it's just very, very underwhelming. And the whole thing here is resolved with Wonder Woman just being, I guess she's being the diplomat. She's the peace negotiator. She negotiates a new arrangement between the Valkyrie and the warriors, which are represented by Thor. And of course she takes it upon herself to represent the living tree. How do I say that? Yggdrasil?
Yggdrasil, yeah.
Yggdrasil, the tree. And basically what's happened is that with the Valkyrie not taking the warriors who have died into Valhalla, the warriors aren't bleeding. And so the blood of the warriors doesn't feed the Yggdrasil, the living tree. And if the tree doesn't get the blood, which is the nutrients, the tree won't be able to contain the serpent, Nagdal, who Wonder Woman tricked last issue. And if the serpent escapes, then that's the end of, I guess that's Ragnarok or something. That's how I interpreted it. So it's very important that this cycle of life and death, that this cycle of warriors fighting and dying and the Valkyrie taking the dead to celebrate in Ragnarok, or celebrate, at Asgard and the afterlife and all that jazz. This is a cycle of life and death that's very, very important. And so they negotiate a resolution at the end, and it's ultimately Wonder Woman who is using her diplomatic skills. So this is, if I'm going to give some props to Becky Cloonan and Michael W. Conrad, they have explored Wonder Woman's warrior aspect. And of course, Wonder Woman being the peaceful warrior, she's also a very good diplomat. And they try to explore that here too. And before we get there, we got some great battle scenes between Wonder Woman and Thor. There's a particularly humorous scene where Wonder Woman, and I don't know if it's an indirect pot shot at Thor, but she takes his hammer and she crushes it. She makes a mockery out of Thor's hammer. But in defense of Thor, he's not himself. Dr. Psycho created all these weapons, so they're not their actual weapons. It's not actually Thor's hammer. Dr. Psycho plays the dwarf who is psychologically and mentally manipulating all the warriors through the weapons that he makes for them. And so once he's defeated through the help of Dead Man, they can finally get their wits about them and negotiate this treaty at the end between the Valkyrie, Thor, and the living tree, Yggdrasil. And yeah, it's, again, it wraps up very conveniently, and I think it's a little bit of a cheat, but I will say this is a nice self-contained story. I think for fans of Wonder Woman, you get everything here. You get mythology, you get Greek, you get Roman, you get Wonder Woman at her best as a warrior. Even without her powers, she slowly gains her powers at the end. You get those of you who like Dr. Psycho, you're getting a little bit of that. You even get Dead Man of all things. So this really does, it gives you sort of a modern day twist on the whole mythology angle. And I have to say, I think this was what we needed coming out of death metal. It was a nice, straightforward story, but it was fun. I had fun reading this. A little bit disappointed in the ending, but I mean, frankly, I've been so disappointed with Wonder Woman in the last few years. I'll take this. I'll take what I can get. It's still better than what I'm accustomed to.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I didn't because it really felt like Michael W. Conrad and Becky Cloonan were doing something fun, and it felt very epic. You know, bringing all these different mythologies together, and to have the end be not a big, you know, there wasn't some big bad. Basically, it was just the Valkyrie themselves that were just tired. But it felt so maybe it didn't feel quite as impactful in the end. Like this is going to be some long lasting story that, you know, builds upon the canon of DC or Wonder Woman or anything like that. But it did feel true to what was going on, and it did feel, you know, at least it brought in Dr. Psycho. I always say that Wonder Woman, especially for as long as she's been around, she has a woefully small and sort of unregarded rogues gallery. So, you know, if somebody can come along and do a definitive run and build on that rogues gallery, I mean, when you think of Wonder Woman villains, I guess you think of Cersei and Cheetah and Ares, and that's sort of it. And so it makes it a little tougher at times to really take the hero of Wonder Woman seriously because she doesn't have the villains. You know, I think that's part of what makes Batman so epic. So anyway, but you know, hearing you say that, it makes me realize it. But when I was reading it, I didn't realize it. So it must not have been really a consideration for me. What I mostly got was, like you said, the fun of the story, and especially the over the top sort of behavior of Thor, and you know the things that he's saying. He's the Marvel version of Thor dialed up to 11, and it is great, as you said, to see Wonder Woman sort of put him in his place when she crushes his hammer. And so, yeah, I felt that it was a good story, a good palate cleanser, like you said, coming out of Future State and the Wonder Woman story that was going on before, and also it was all set up on that last page, right, for what's going forward. I mean, when you want to talk about epic and mythic and maybe really playing into the canon of DC and what's going on, seeing that final page with Themyscira in ruins and Diana saying, by the goddess, what's happened, you know, that really teases something important to come, you know, and you wonder how much Dr. Psycho may have had to do with it or does have to do with it. Is he going to be sort of the big bad of this run? You know, Mariko Tamaki's run really leaned into the Maxwell Lord sort of aspect, and I guess you could consider him one of Wonder Woman's rogues, but again, it hasn't been established. I don't know what it is about Wonder Woman. She just doesn't have, you know, when you think about Batman or even Superman, they have those villains that you always associate with them. And, you know, there's certain eras that you think back on fondly. And I don't know, Wonder Woman just doesn't have that. And it's sort of frustrating and baffling. You know, you even think about some of the Marvel characters that are more, I won't say well known because Wonder Woman is known worldwide, but she doesn't have the same identity in the comics that's well established. Like I think over at Marvel, Black Widow, right, who's somebody that been around for a while, but not as long as Wonder Woman. But even she has sort of more of a defined era, you know, or you can look at certain eras of her where you go, oh yeah, Black Widow when, you know, George Perez was doing it or what have you. And Wonder Woman is just not that way. So that's kind of what I'm hoping. I've been waiting almost my whole life to get a real established run. I mean, you can think about the secret agent Wonder Woman when she wasn't actually in the costume. You can think about the John Byrne era.
Yeah.
George Perez did have the era coming out of Crisis, obviously, and then the Gail Simone era. But even those, they're not real defined the way some of these other stories are. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping. Yeah, this might not have been the most impactful in terms of the resolution of the story, but it is very well done technically. I liked meeting Siegfried. I could see him definitely coming back as a supporting character for Wonder Woman, and I thought overall it was done really well. The colors are spectacular. It's a certain palette that sort of reflects
Mhm.
being in this fantasy world of Asgard and Valhalla. So I think Tamara Bonvillain did a great job. And then when you talk about the line work of Travis Moore, I mean, it's been spectacular from start to finish. And the thing that was great about it is being in this sort of fantasy world. So many interesting backgrounds when they're in Valhalla with the Valkyries. A lot of the backgrounds are done by the color artists, but then we're back in Asgard or Valhalla, and there's the inns and the backgrounds and the sort of nature part of it. And then when Diana confronts Psycho, there's no background at all. It's very much the white space of her mind, which is really interesting. So yeah, as much as Travis Moore's art is spectacular, I almost, in terms of the character work, I almost think his backgrounds are where his art shines even more. And you just take a look at that last page with Themyscira and flames and know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
As far as the backup story, again, it feels a little bit out of place. Not quite as much as I felt like at first, because ultimately I think the main story did end up being a little more light-hearted than I initially thought it would be. And so this sort of all ages young Diana story, it doesn't feel as disparate as it felt early on, but it still feels like it should be its own thing. But I am enjoying it. It does get Diana's characterization right, especially for being a young version of Diana, and you can tell that she has sort of lessons to learn. She's very much young and sees the world in black and white, and we know things are more complicated than that. But you sort of get the feeling that that's the lesson that she's learning here. And Paulina Ganishaw's art, it's absolutely spectacular. It's very much kind of an anime or manga style, I guess you'd say. Um, with thicker lines that very much suits an all ages book. So I thought it was really great, and I do hope, I've said this before, I do hope DC collects this in sort of its own trade paperback or whatnot, because it's something that I would love
Yeah.
for my daughter to check out. I don't know if she'd get that much out of the main story. It might be a little too complicated or mature for her, but this backup story is perfect for a younger Wonder Woman fan for sure.
Yeah. I agree with you. I share your thoughts on the backup. It's not, it's not, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, quite frankly, it's not my particular artistic style of choice. But there's nothing wrong with it. It reads well. Like you said, nailed the character of Diana well. The art really is fantastic. It deserves to be collected in its own series. I admit that I picked this, when I'm reading Wonder Woman, I'm definitely not reading it for the backup feature, but it is something there. It does feel a little bit jarring to these types of incarnations of Wonder Woman to be in the same comic. But there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. And again, it's just not my cup of tea. And obviously, we have a bias. We're focusing our review on the core story, and that's probably unfair because there's a lot of dialogue in this backup, and it really delves into the character of Diana. And she's young, and she's learning, and she's got all these questions. And so, in many ways, for someone who is, for new readers, and especially maybe for the younger readers, but who are we kidding? Even for us older ones, maybe I should give it more of a chance. But I have to admit, I just want a little bit more. I like my Diana a little bit more older and learned, and a little bit, perhaps God forbid, a little bit maybe jaded a little bit, because I like a little bit more of the drama as opposed to the innocence.
Yeah, and you're right. This version of the story, it felt like the biggest chunk of story, because you're right, it was really dialogue heavy, and almost, and again, Jordi Belair, she's mostly known as a color artist, so this may be something that she learns a little while later. I did feel at times that there was a little too much dialogue, and it felt like it was dragging a little bit. So the dialogue and what's presented here, it didn't feel like it shouldn't be there, but I think it's just a matter of pacing, which I've talked about all the time, about that's the hardest thing to get right. And obviously, Jordy, even as a color artist, has been creating comics for a long time, and you sort of um, get that idea of how a comic should be paced out. But that's not the same, working on comics as a color artist as actually writing it yourself. So some of this may have been better served to be in the previous issue or in the next issue, because it did feel like this was, I won't say it was a chore to get through, but I kept going, wait, there's another page. There's so much here, to your point. And again, especially when you're talking about if it's aimed at a younger reader, that can be a lot for them to try to get through. But again, it's beautiful to look at, and I think, like Rocky said, it's very true to the character of Diana, and probably we'd get more out of it, like we're both saying, if it's collected in a trade all on its own. Because then, I mean, you can't help but compare it to the other story because it's in the same book, you know.
Yeah.
So
No,
I
I
think
hear
that does a disservice to it. So anyway, moving on. Next up, we have the Joker #4. This is written by James Tynion. The art is by Guillem March. Arif Prianto does the colors. Tom Napolitano on letters. Then we have the Punchline backup, which is written by Sam Johns and James Tynion. Arts by Mirko Andolfo, colors by Romulo Fajardo Jr., and letters by Ariana Mayer. So this is interesting. We get more Joker than we've had in any issue of this Joker series so far. You know, Rocky and I have both joked that it should be called Jim Gordon or Gordon's Quest or something like that. But then, you know, it's going to sell less than it would sell as the Joker. So I don't mind that they call it Joker because really it's a Jim Gordon story. But like I said, this does have the most Joker in it so far, and it's probably the reason why I enjoyed this issue less than I've enjoyed any of the issues. And that's not to say it's bad by any stretch of the imagination, but the first half of the issue sort of feels like the story has felt all along, with James Gordon giving us his thoughts and sort of narrating the events for us. And then at some point, sort of in the middle, right around page 8 or so, maybe page 9, it sort of flips, and then it's all about the Joker and his plans and what he wants, and that's when it sort of bogs down for me a little bit, because I don't. It's not that I don't care, but again, I wasn't even going to pick up this book because I'm pretty much burnt out on the Joker, a character that I've never really cared that much for in the first place. But it is necessary to understand where the Joker's coming from, and he sort of redirects Gordon in a way. You know, Gordon has been, you know, hired to kill the Joker for $25 million, and he doesn't even know if he's going to be able to actually pull the trigger when he initially accepts the quest. And now the Joker has sort of thrown things on their side, because he's basically telling Gordon, hey, A-Day wasn't me. You know, all along, everybody has assumed A-Day was the Joker, and Gordon doesn't know whether to believe him or not, and how that's all going to play out. So I do think that the story is going to revert, or the kind of the structure, the story structure is going to revert to more of what we have had in the first 3 issues, and we have the first half of this issue, with Gordon sort of narrating and us really getting to know him as a character, you know, more in depth than we have in years. And the Joker is going to be more of a supporting character in his own book, which I'm all for. So again, the actual exposition from the Joker here, the reason it's needed does make sense, but just as a byproduct of that, I just enjoyed this issue less than any of the previous ones. We do get a little bit of Oracle and Stephanie Brown and Cassandra Cain, a little of their investigation into Cressida, you know, this woman that's hired Gordon to take out the Joker, and we wonder, you know, who she is. And so we get a little insight into her, and the fact that everything that she does and her movements and everything is with an eye toward somebody watching her, somebody following her. She covers her tracks very well, so that's sort of added another layer of mystery to that. We get a lot of, I guess I'll call her Lady Bane. I don't know if we have an official name for her.
I think it's Vengeance, isn't it? Vengeance?
Oh, that's right.
Called
Yeah.
Vengeance? Yeah.
She feels, I don't know how I feel about her. It sort of just feels super derivative. I don't think that she's a character that needs to exist. Like, I get maybe you can't use Bane right now because of everything that happened recently when Tom King's run or something, but it feels like, okay, well, let's just create a female version of Bane just to create a female version of Bane. Like, I don't know, she just doesn't feel, there's nothing unique about her, you know, that we've seen. So, you know, if you're going to create a female version of Bane and the only difference is she's female, Bane's daughter or whatever, then just use Bane. Like, I don't know. There's not, maybe Tynion has plans for her beyond this, and she's going to turn out to be interesting, but she certainly isn't up to this point. So I don't know. I mean, the art is spectacular. Guillem March's art has been fantastic throughout. His line work, um, his character acting, the colors are solid. So it's still enjoyable, but just less so with this much Joker. Also, when did the Joker have the eyes that were different? I don't ever remember him having eyes two different colors. I don't remember seeing that in Joker War.
Yeah,
So I
I
don't know.
don't remember that. That's a good point because there's that one page where it's quite clear that the Joker has almost like you said a deep dark red eyes, or at least a red eye anyway. And I'm not sure if that's did we miss that in Joker War? Or maybe somebody can leave a comment
I mean,
below.
Joker,
Or I
yeah,
don't know.
the Joker's been around for years and it's never been a thing. I think it's called heterochromatoma. I think when you have two different color eyes. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, it's still a solid book. I'm still on board, but I will say this: if we start getting this much Joker in each issue, it might be something where I do jump off and just skim it or read the Gordon parts or wait till it's all over and kind of get a recap of what happened because I'm just not down for this much Joker. That's why I was going to avoid the book in the first place.
I'm
But
surprised you're saying that, Jace, because I mean this is actually the first issue since the first one that we've actually gotten Joker. Most of the previous issues have involved Commissioner Gordon, which is
I
of course our
know, and
highlight. But
that's what I've liked. I don't want. It sounds
it is
weird, but
called the Joker.
I don't want any, but I don't want any Joker. I want not. The amount that the Joker showed up in the first issue, which was like 2 pages. That's the perfect amount of Joker. Keep Joker limited to 2 pages. I mean, it's the whole thing. Like, leave him wanting more, Tynion. Like, you call it the Joker, but I mean, I haven't heard nobody. I've heard a lot of people praising this book, and I know there's a lot of people out there who absolutely love the Joker and they think he's their favorite character. He's the best Batman villain or whatever. But I haven't heard anybody complaining that there's not enough Joker in this book because it's that good. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I know I'm in the minority. But the one other thing that might keep me coming back to is we do have a Talon show up in a very menacing way, and I am a fan of the Court of Owls and the Talon, so that could keep me hanging around. So I guess we'll see. I mean, I still think this is a great book, and I do expect that this is probably the exception. The amount of Joker here is the exception rather than the rule, and we're going to go back to focusing on Gordon in the next issue, I bet.
Yeah, I actually think that the timing of the Joker showing up in this issue 4 was great because at some point you knew that there was going to be a conversation between the Joker and Commissioner Gordon. I think that was pretty much a given, and I think all of us in the back of our minds as a reader, I don't believe that the Commissioner Gordon will kill the Joker, but I do believe maybe he'll be pushed to the limit and he'll certainly contemplate it, and there's certainly scenes in this issue where he's got the Joker in his sights. There was the scene where Vengeance, the daughter of Bane, had Joker by the throat. Commissioner Gordon's hiding behind the corner inside the cabin. He could have taken out the Joker, and likely Vengeance as well. He had the opportunity, but that's not in Gordon's nature. And I love the dialogue by James Tynion that he uses. This is about the lies that we tell ourselves, and Gordon himself narrates the issue, and he talks about the lies that he told his ex-wife, and about that lies telling himself that he was a good man trying to make a better world. But here's a man who, if he is making a better world, he's doing so at the cost of a broken marriage, a lost son, problematic relationship with his daughter. I mean, he's definitely paid a price. So this isn't exactly someone that you would hold up as a pillar of one. He might have integrity, but it's sort of like the plumber whose plumbing in his house is terrible. I mean, you might be really good at your job, but maybe you're the best plumber in the world, but you don't have running water in your own house. It's funny how that works sometimes, and Gordon seems to be sort of caught in that scenario in his own life, and the Joker admires Commissioner Gordon for actually admitting that. I mean, at one point, I think that Gordon says to him, Gordon says, "I don't know that I know how to be good, but I know that I know how to fight evil." And the Joker knows he can always rely on Gordon to tell the truth. But he's also insistent that he never had anything to do with the attack on Arkham Asylum. And the Joker seems to be likely telling the truth. And what I love about this issue was exciting. We had an attack on two fronts. We got Vengeance wanting to get avenge her father's death at the hands of the Joker gas. She blames the Joker for her father's death. We got the Samson family sending their oldest siblings. The one guy's Buddy Samson, and I don't know what the daughter's name is, but they end up attacking the Joker as well. And I mean the gruesome. I feel sorry for Buddy Samson because he's defaced essentially by the Joker, who wraps some sort of tensor bandage or some burning barbed wire around his face. It looks absolutely horrifying, and and he's doing this while he's having this conversation with Commissioner Gordon. So what I like about this is not only are we getting something out of the dialogue, but while the dialogue is occurring, we're not just getting a revelation through the dialogue into the insights into the Joker and Commissioner Gordon. We're seeing something absolutely horrific take place. He's defacing another human being while he's casually talking and questioning Gordon, who's also tied up. And, Tynion gets it here. He gets it. And as you said, you mentioned the one red eye of the Joker. That's so brilliantly done. Guillem March, the artist there, he exemplifies the Joker looks more menacing and devil-like here than he has in a long time. And it just really, really works well. And it's just funny how we, just when I think I'm sick of the Joker, this is actually an issue where I'm getting just enough of the Joker. 25% of the time, 1 out of 4 issues we get Joker. That actually works well here. Maybe that's what the secret formula is. Give us Joker and, just a quarter at a time and it's all good. But I don't know. I like this. Again, this is one of my highlights of the week. This had emotional gravitas, weight, great action sequences, and Commissioner Gordon at the end of it, he ends up being let go by Vengeance. And what's interesting is that when Vengeance lets him go, Vengeance herself says to Gordon, she says, "Go home, Mr. Gordon. You're already drowning in the darkness. Head back to the light while you still can." And I love that because it's kind of revealing, because Gordon is getting darker and darker. He knows sooner or later he's going to have to make a judgment call again as to whether or not to take out the Joker. But we're also getting something about Vengeance. Vengeance, this daughter of Bane, she's not an idiot. She's got compassion. She doesn't kill for the sake of killing. She does seem to have her own agenda. It's to avenge her father, I'm sure. But she's not a one-dimensional, she's not a one-dimensional character. I think there's more to her, and I like the teases to her character. I think we have more to look forward to for her. So, yeah.
Good stuff. I mean, she doesn't come across as a meathead, at least, so there's exactly that. And yeah, the fact that she walks away from Gordon, you wonder, because I don't think Bane would do that. But I do agree with you, and I echo your sentiments about Gordon's sort of self-analysis. And you mentioned a plumber who doesn't have running water. For me, it's always, having been a chef. Man, when I was working and running a kitchen and cooking 12 hours a day, the last thing I wanted to do when I got home was cook. And I know a lot of other chefs that are the same way, and it's their families that suffer the most, right? Like, before I was a chef professionally, I used to cook great food at home all the time, and my family loved it. And then when I became a chef, the last thing I want to do was cook when I got home, and they're like, "Man, you don't cook for us anymore." And yeah, so it's kind of the same thing with Gordon. He knows the rules, he knows the law, he knows right and wrong, but it doesn't mean he's a good person. That's kind of how he's seen himself, but he can fight evil, and that's really great. So and sort of along the same lines of what we were saying about the Wonder Woman book, this is also a book that is pretty dialogue heavy, and a lot of it has to do with Gordon's narration, which we only got in the first half of this issue, but the second half we get a big exposition dump from the Joker himself. So either way, this is one of those books where you get a lot of value for your money, because it takes you quite a long time to read it and digest. The backup story, less so, and I don't really have much to say about it. This Punchline story, it hasn't been particularly interesting for me, and the sort of the twist that happens in this issue with or this episode with Punchline apparently having recruited the other members of the Royal Flush gang to her side without the Queen realizing it.
Yeah.
That's super tropey and, been used 1,000 times. And it's not, frankly, I expect better from Tynion based on all his other work. So, yeah, everybody knows I feel sort of the same way about Punchline as I do about Joker. She feels unnecessary to me. She is very different than Harley, I think some people had that question early on. We already have a Harley Quinn. Why do we need Punchline? Well, Harley's sort of been converted into an anti-hero or a straight-up hero at this point. So they needed to replace her. And Punchline is very different. She's very much darker. She's very much twisted. She's not sort of confused or hasn't been manipulated by the Joker the way Harley was into becoming a villain. The Punchline, this is of her own free will. And so I guess I am saying there's room for Punchline in a way. But I don't care for the Joker. I'm not going to care for a sort of a female version of, and Punchline isn't just, some female version of the Joker. She does have different motivations and she has her own unique character, but she's the closest to a female Joker of, a female version of any of Batman's villains. She definitely has this sort of nihilistic view of the world and whatnot. And she's just not a character that I'm interested in. So this story is not, the story depresses me, honestly. We've talked about it before with the courtroom scenes we've seen with her case and whatnot, and how it seems like she could definitely sort of cheat the system and be set free based on alternate reality. I won't call it any sort of manipulation of the truth. It's a straight up alternate reality. But there's a lot of people in our own world that have been living in an alternate reality and believing straight up lies. So it feels all too real that it could happen that way. And like I said, pretty just like it's depressing in real life when I see these people that, don't believe the facts in front of their face. It's frustrating and depressing here to see the same sort of thing starting to play out. And I would even sort of extrapolate that to these members of the Royal Flush Gang, like Orca, who has decided I'm going to believe what Punchline says over the Queen of Spades or whatever, who has been, running their gang and running this prison for a long, long time. And all of a sudden you're going to throw your lot in with this crazy psychotic Punchline just because you think you believe what she's telling you. She's a psycho. Why would you believe anything that she says? She lies constantly, So I can't imagine this Royal Flush Gang is going to end up for the better by switching sides, but it's what happens. The artwork's solid though, but I would expect that from Mirko Andolfo. So, but overall, like a lot of these backups, I could skip it. It's not necessary in my mind. So,
not much to add to what you said. I generally agree, except I'm prepared to cut Tynion a little bit more slack on the on the story here, only because I do think that we need to have more background on Punchline. And while I think that this was fairly predictable in terms of a story, it was a little bit tropey. I mean, you can kind of see this coming, that obviously Punchline must have more influence. I think it's implied, at least my interpretation is that Punchline learned a lot from the Joker. And I think Punchline learned a lot about about manipulation. She learned a lot more from the Joker than we have heretofore been made privy to. And this is just an indication of that. And one of those things is having connections. And she probably utilized some of her connections to the Joker to make sure her stay in prison was safe. And so she probably had this set up for quite a while. This tells me that Punchline is no pushover. And there's a difference between readers not liking Punchline. Like I respect, I would just say to you, because I know what it's like just to not like a character. I've absolutely been there. And it's one thing not to like Punchline and maybe kind of like just innately not like the character. But there's a difference between that and blaming the character for, just, being as smart as she is. I mean, I think that this is a character that I think I'm hoping, and Tynion I'm sure is hoping, Chase, that guys like you are going to love to hate her moving forward even more. But that will make there's going to be a story in the future where all this is going to pay off, because I think, and you hit the nail on the head. We are living in right now. I know you hate it. We live in a society where there's a lot of people buying into this, all kinds of nonsense. And it's a very divisive world we live in right now. But this is the type of villain that I think cathartically, I like to live. I can't wait till Punchline gets her comeuppance. And I hope she gets it, because it's going to be cathartic for me, because I get really sick of people in the real world who play these types of games. And so I think Punchline, I maintain again that I think Punchline is the villain, is it's a villain that we need to see more in comic books, because we need to see this type of, we need to see this type of villain and how to combat it. And we need more creativity from the writers in terms of how do you combat a villain who isn't just all fisticuffs, but uses social media. We need more of that. And I think Punchline is in many ways a villain that there's a lot of great stories ahead with her. I just hope that she doesn't continue to, maybe now's not the right time to cultivate these types of stories, because, I mean, fans like you and I are ones that they want to keep, and you want to attract fans. You don't want to alienate them. And maybe because of the real world politics right now, maybe this is not the right time to push Punchline on readership. I don't know. But I wouldn't want to discard the character. Too much potential.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and there are those characters I love to hate, and as much as I rail against Amanda Waller, to me she's become a villain that I love to hate, and she sparks genuine reaction in me, and that's probably for the good. Punchline for me is not that character. It's not that I dislike her, or she's somebody I love to hate. I don't care. I'm completely apathetic toward her, which I think is sort of the exact opposite thing you want. She doesn't feel necessary to me. She doesn't feel interesting. So, even if you love to hate a character, at least you're engaged. I have no engagement with Punchline. In my mind, she could disappear tomorrow, and I won't miss her.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on. Next book we're going to talk about, Justice League Last Ride number 2. Batman's Orders, which is a fantastic title for a book. It's written by Chip Zardasky. Art is by Miguel Mendonca. Colors by Enrica Aaron Angiolini. And letters by Ann World Design. And a little bit of a transitional issue, Rocky. What did you think of this one?
I really like this issue. I'm very happy with Chip Zardasky, man. He's impressing me, man. His DC work so far, I'm just really impressed. This entire issue, this issue is everything that I really needed, and this was all. You want to talk about, like, I'm not a writer, I'm not a comic book writer, I don't pretend to be, but I can appreciate good structure to a story. And I mean, because this one just cries out, this was such a great story because of the way it was structured. Because we're getting the backstory told to us in flashbacks of what really happened to Martian Manhunter. We're not getting the full story yet, but the juxtaposition between the backstory of what led to the death of Martian Manhunter and the guilt and the impact that had emotionally on Superman and even on Batman in different ways, and how that's impacting Superman and Batman's behavior now as they're dealing with this new challenge they have of hiding Lobo from the people who are looking for him, and hiding Lobo and traveling to Apocalypse. And this entire issue takes place on the space flight between Earth and Apocalypse, and an adventure that is had along the way. And while that's occurring, we're getting flashbacks into what happened to Martian Manhunter, and which involved this huge battle against Darkseid. And there was just some absolutely epic moments here that just, oh my God. There's a scene, there are scenes here. My favorite scene, hands down. I love Wonder Woman. She's right on the cover. Beautiful cover. I think that's Mendonca. He did the cover, I think. Oh no, Derek Robertson is on there. He did the cover. Derek Robertson. Fantastic cover of Wonder Woman decked out in her warrior armor. And I got to tell you, it starts off with the flashback showing Wonder Woman doing battle somewhere either on Themyscira or somewhere on Earth. And my favorite scene is where it shows her taking out Granny Goodness. I mean, we got a decapitation scene people. I mean, I thought I loved it when she snapped Maxwell Lord's neck, but Zardasky's Wonder Woman isn't afraid to kick ass and take names. Granny goodness, we barely knew thee, and good riddance. I absolutely love this. The battle sequences was fantastic. Right away, Zardasky established the stakes here of the battle, the battle that led to what we know will ultimately lead to the death of Martian Manhunter. While we don't know how Martian Manhunter ultimately died in this issue, we know that there was an incredible amount at stake. The Earth is under attack by parademons. All seems lost. Aquaman seems to have lost his life as well, because wasn't in the first issue. He seems, maybe he's missing. I'm not really sure. But a Batman, there's a moment between Batman with Martian Manhunter where Batman admits he doesn't know what to do. That if his next set of plans, Batman, this man who prepares for every contingency, doesn't have the answer, and he feels hopeless. And Martian Manhunter doesn't need to be a mind reader to know that this is serious stuff in this flashback. This was brilliantly done. The dialogue was great. I felt it. I thought it was I wanted to stay in the past. I didn't even want to come to the future and be on the spaceship, because to me, the present day, the challenge they have of protecting Lobo, I don't care about that. I want to know what happened in the past. But Zardasky brilliantly just teases us. He gives us snapshots of the past, and it's like, I'm just dying to know. Ultimately, we know that Martian Manhunter has to be the guy that makes a sacrifice. And the way that Zardasky teases us is, during the space flight, Superman, it's clear that Superman and Batman don't really get along. Flash tries to have a conversation with Batman. That doesn't go very well. Batman is Batman. He's not exactly Mr. Conversation. And, there's a ship that's while they're on this space flight to to ultimately to go to Apocalypse, Superman has to rescue another spacefaring group that is being sucked into a black hole, and he deviates from their flight path in order to help them out. And you see the symbolism there. You see, Superman's reminded by Jon Stewart, who knows that Superman is still hurting from the loss of Martian Manhunter, that, look, you made a choice. You deviated from our flight plan to help these people, just like John Jones did. John Jones made a choice too, and it cost him his life. But that's what we do. That's who we are. And again, just really hitting it home. Fantastic art. There's a one-page spread. There's a one-pager here that shows Darkseid, absolutely brilliantly illustrated, where he's taken out some Guardians. Oh my God. I don't know, man. This is the Justice League story that I want in. I want Zardasky to be writing the main Justice League title, because this is what I'm looking for. Dialogue, art, gravitas, emotion, feeling. Man, I'm loving it. Sorry, man. What'd you think? I love this.
Yeah, I loved it too. It did feel like a bit of a transitional issue for me, like I said. But that allowed Zardasky to give us a lot of character moments, like you were alluding to, and plus it allowed him to do some flashback work to try to give some context to the story. So I agree with you. I want Zardasky to be doing the regular Justice League title. Obviously, the reason that doesn't work with this particular story, it's the last stride. It's supposed to be the last Justice League story. The reason there's so much emotion here is because Aquaman is gone. John Jones is gone. And that has driven a wedge between Superman and Batman, which in turn affects the whole rest of the team. But I'm glad the story exists because, like you said, that moment of Wonder Woman turning around and decapitating somebody was awesome. The Darkseid moment coming through the boom tube, like you mentioned, awesome. I mean, Miguel Mendonca, somebody, an artist that I know who's fantastic, doesn't get enough credit. Hopefully this is going to raise his profile. I mean, the story beats the who Superman is when he didn't hesitate to go rescue the ship from the black hole, even though he knows it's defeating the purpose of the League, transporting Lobo in secret to Apocalypse. It's all clicking for me. The fact that Apocalypse is going to be a terrible idea to go and hide Lobo is so apparent. And Batman's supposed to know everything, but I don't know. Maybe maybe he's saying that it's going to be a great place to hide him, even knowing in the back of his mind that it's not, but it might lead them down the path of doing what Lobo himself purports should be done. He's like, you guys are making a mistake. Um, everybody knows that if you want to get rid of somebody, you just chop them up and dump them in space. Lobo's telling them, this is what you should be doing to me. This is what I would do. So yeah, very, very much on point, very much in character with who Lobo is. And there's a sadness that permeates some of the characters that really sells this as sort of the last story. And these aren't the same heroes that we knew, right? Because of what's happened, because of the tragedy, because of the attack of Darkseid at some point when he attacked Earth, and many people died. So the one thing that did kind of strike me here is, Darkseid very much should be sort of it's interesting, right? Like Thanos was sort of an homage to Darkseid, but Thanos has arguably, because of the MCU, has grown in popularity, I guess you'd say, or he's just more well known around the world. Like, people know who Thanos is, and there's a menace to the character that doesn't necessarily exist with Darkseid, even though it should. And I know that's what Zack Snyder was trying to do with his Justice League movies. I don't know if even with the Snyder Cut, if it was very successful, but this is a reminder in this story that Darkseid is really a bad guy. Like, and the fact that the Justice League was able to turn him away, and in Jeff Johns and Jim Lee's New 52 Justice League, it never really adequately explained to me why Darkseid didn't try again and again and again, right? And apparently he did at some point, and that's maybe Zardasky was thinking along those same lines. So this is just a reminder of just how powerful Darkseid is, and that image that we both mentioned with him coming through the boom tube with a dead Guardian in each hand is just absolutely fantastic. Like, I love this art. Miguel is he's firing on all cylinders here. I mean, this guy is so good, and the color work speaks to me as well. And yeah, I think just overall a really, really fantastic issue. Even though, like I said, it does feel sort of literally transitional, right? Like they're transporting Lobo from Earth to Apocalypse, but the story structure and the flashbacks and what's going on, and just the emotion, the story beats, the little character moments are all fantastic. And I also have to give a shout out to the variant cover by In-Huk Lee, which it's one of those covers where it doesn't necessarily, nothing that happens in the story. Jessica Cruz is in the variant cover, for example, and she hasn't even shown up in the story yet. And Kilowog has Lobo in sort of a half Nelson or what have you, and it's just fantastic. Kilowog looks a little more pig-like than maybe he should, but I mean, yeah, the glowing chains and everything, it's just, yeah, absolutely great cover. When I saw it, I was blown away. And even though Lobo, may be in danger, he still has that sort of shit-eating Lobo grin that he always has on his face. So I agree with you. I think for me, there's probably one book that I think was slightly better. So this isn't my favorite DC book of the week, but it's a close second. So I thought it was fantastic. All right, moving on next to our black and white book of the week, which I'm not sure why DC is deciding to do this in black and white. Are people okay with that? I do think the art is better in black and white than in color, as we talked about last time. So I'm talking about Future State Gotham #2, and we covered it. Future State Gotham, the backup stories with Red Hood, when we did Future State, and we were talking about Milogiannis's art and how it sort of reminds us of the Doug cartoon. That's less the case when it's in black and white, but it also doesn't have a very finished look. So I just wonder how people are feeling. I'm not spending money on this, so whatever. But I could see some people not being real happy with this sort of style of art, just because it feels unfinished. But it's written by Joshua Williamson and Dennis Culver. The art is by the aforementioned Giannis Milogiannis, lettered by Troy Petrie. There's a couple of covers, one by Landrone, the other by Derek Chu. And there's no color artist, obviously, because there's no colors. And then there is a backup story, which in my mind, I thought the art, it's also in black and white, but I thought the art in the backup was substantially better, but it's Olivier Copiel, and he's one of the greatest living comic artists these days, so that's not a big surprise. Um, but that art was just stunning. Backup's written by John Ridley, colors by Darren Bennett. So yeah, really, really cool. As far as the main story goes, I don't know. I sort of have mixed feelings. Like I see what Williamson and Culver are trying to do, and I sort of like the idea of this redemption of Jason Todd and the fact that the sort of the mystery man that Jason Todd has been talking to, even back in the Future State Gotham stories, it's been Bruce Wayne all along. So we know he survived the explosion, the destruction of the magistrate headquarters in Dark Detective. And so I do like that, because at this point, Jason Todd has been back long enough that I feel like the whole bad boy of the Bat family, not getting along with everybody else sort of characterization is sort of played out. I feel like the hatchet should have, one of two things. Either the hatchet should have been buried and they can just accept Jason for who he is and stop giving him crap for the fact that maybe he, pushes the boundaries of ethics a little more than they're comfortable with. Like, either accept him for that or just cut him off completely and have no contact with him. Because I feel like in reality, if I were in a situation like that with somebody in my life, that's the decision that I would make, right? Like, stop trying to change that person. It's not going to happen. They are who they are, right? And when they tell you who they are, either through words or actions, believe them, right? That's like a life lesson for everybody out there, not to get on my soapbox or anything, but believe them when they show or tell you who they are. And so Jason Todd has shown and told the other members of the Bat family for years who he is. So either believe him and accept him, or don't have anything to do with him, right? Like, let him live his own life. And so I do like that maybe this is taking us down that path a little bit. But again, it is sort of a cheat, because it's Jason following orders from Bruce that he'll do something that the other members of the Bat family will respect and believe that he has changed, even though we know that he hasn't. It's just, for this particular situation, his and Bruce's sort of plans and an outlook on this situation sort of coincide. And that might not always be the case. Very next time some situation comes along, they may be diametrically opposed. But I do like the idea that Jason can be welcomed back into the Bat family and accepted a little more freely, without all these conditions on it, because I think he deserves that. But can we get there, and is this the right way to do it? I don't know. So it's okay. I'll say that. And the art is okay. And I am glad it isn't black and white, because I think if you color this art, it does take something away from it, and it doesn't work exactly well. But the other part of it is there's a couple pinups. One's by Raphael Grandpa, again, living legend. The other's by an Asian, probably, I guess it's a Japanese name, Kamon Shirahama. Really fantastic black and white Batgirl image. And then you have Olivia Copiel's art in the backup. Every one of those artists, Grandpa, Shirahama, Copiel, their art is so much better than Milogiannis. It's not doing his art any favors, that it's the weakest art in the book. I feel a little bad for him. So anyway, what did you think, Rocky?
I'm just not really interested in the narrative here, because it seems to me to be a little bit. It just seems so, I guess, maybe too predictable. I guessed. I mean, we sort of guessed that the person he was talking to is probably Bruce Wayne, but it's a little bit inconsistent. I have a hard time imagining that Bruce Wayne would tell Jason Todd to go undercover, hurt people, damage them, give the impression that you're killing some people and taking them in, lie to other members of the Bat family, and then Bruce Wayne, the Batman we know, I think would let all the members of the Bat family know that Jason Todd was in on it. I mean, the other members of the Bat family don't really get along with Jason Todd anyway, even when they are on the same team. So I don't really see. It feels forced to me, to be honest. It feels forced. I mean, I get it. I'll accept it. But it really does seem convenient, and it does seem forced to me that Batman is, well, Batman. So Batman now, this is Jason Todd's redemption arc, because Bruce Wayne is who the other members of the Bat family, Bruce Wayne needs the other members of the Bat family, the ones that he trusts more than Jason Todd, to believe that he's still dead, but he's going to trust Jason Todd. And because Jason Todd is normally an a-hole, he's going to go to Jason Todd to infiltrate the magistrate. I mean, it just, as Peacekeeper Red, I don't know. Honestly, it doesn't drive with me very well. I have a hard time syncing that with my previous preconceptions of Jason Todd. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, I know that Jason Todd is always the black sheep of the Bat family, but that is precisely the reason why that I think the Bat family, that Bruce Wayne, that all members of the Bat family could easily pretend that they don't like Jason Todd, because most of them don't.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, this whole facade of, oh my God, Bruce Wayne, we have to, I'm recruiting you, Jason. I'm depending upon you. This depends on you. My master plan depends on you. This seems really, really forced. And look, we only have to read even Zardasky's, in Batman Urban Legends, the Teardrop story. I mean, Jason Todd is a really screwed up character. He's the most screwed up member of the Bat family. And while people love Jason Todd as a character, and I love him too, this is not somebody that you necessarily want to, put all your eggs in the basket held by Jason Todd. But again, they're doing that and they want to prop him up. And certainly if they're successful, as undoubtedly they will be, this will prop up Jason Todd. But it feels forced to me. And how many times does Nightwing have to have an argument with Jason Todd, or Tim Drake have an argument with Jason Todd? This is almost as tropey as how many. It's almost, we've probably seen the Joker as many times as that has been done. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit. This doesn't really work for me, but I will accept it, because that's how they will defeat the magistrate in Future State. It's going to be because of Jason Todd. But if I'm nitpicky here, and I am, Jason Todd has done a lot of inconsistent things as Peacekeeper Red, and earning his place. And I think it's been very poorly handled narratively by editorially and frankly getting to this point. And I agree that the art is better in black and white than it is when it's colored, but it doesn't feel like DC to me. It just doesn't have the same feel to me. It's not my cup of tea. I don't want to take the wind out of anybody's sails. I encourage people to read this. It's actually easier to follow than I would have thought. This is actually easier to follow than the abortion issues that were Jason Todd was in the Future State. Jason Todd issues were awful, terrible, horribly drawn. The narrative mess. This actually makes sense because they finally spelled it out that he's working with Bruce Wayne. I don't know why they couldn't have done that to begin with, but in any event, yeah. This is kind of a miss for me, only because I don't really care about Future State, because I think it's going to be avoided anyway. And if I'm brutally honest, if Future State is ultimately resolved because of something heroic Jason Todd did, it'll be a disappointment to me.
Yeah, I agree with you, and you're 100% right. Batman or Bruce could easily tell the other members of the Bat family that Jason Todd's undercover with the magistrate. They're still going to hate him. They're still going to dislike him. They're still going to, he's going to find a way to screw it up. They would still treat him exactly as they are treating him in this issue. So you can't make the argument, it's because that Bruce wants them to, distrust Jason Todd. They already do, no matter what.
Yes.
So, yeah, kind of silly. As far as the backup story by John Ridley, it is a story of Jace Fox, this next Batman. I don't really have much to say. The art's fantastic, but it's another one of those situations where I don't know what the point of this backup is. He's fighting some criminals with his sister. Okay. There are some former Penguin henchmen. Okay. He doesn't like guns. Okay. So I'm not really sure what the point is of it. The story itself, there's just I don't get it. I'll say I said this before. I'll say it again. DC should have just given Ridley a monthly next Batman book and just have all the Jace Fox stories just in there. Let him just month in, month out, put in the characterization for the character, whatever his end goal is, and just have it all play out there. Because from the start, it's been here's a Jace Fox story over here, here's one over here. They've got the digital first storyline with the next Batman. It makes it confusing. There's no common story thread that's running throughout. We're just getting this story here and this story over here, and I don't know. Do I have an idea of who Jace Fox is yet? No, I really don't, because it's been all over the place in all these different books. So I think DC is doing a real disservice to poor John Ridley, trying to tell the story of Jace Fox. But the art's fantastic. I could just kind of scroll through and look at the art all day and just not bother to read the words, and I'd be perfectly happy. The art's that good.
Yeah, I agree. The art is really it really is fantastic. It's well done. I like the use of yellow, using the use of yellow on the word boxes, and then the word the word boxes all in yellow. I think that worked very well, at least near the end there. Um, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think John Ridley is getting short thrift with Batman, with Jason. I think editorially, I think he's. Part of me wonders if that's one of the reasons why he's made his way over to Marvel, and now he's trying his luck with Black Panther as well. He certainly seems to be having his cake, dealing with some pretty big characters at the big two between Batman and Black Panther, and all the power to him. John Ridley does have he does think cinematically. I think his stories are. I think his stories. I think he's getting better, and it'll be interesting to see how he does with Black Panther over at Marvel. And yeah, and the art here was great. Who did you say the artist was in this backup? It was Olivia Coppola.
Yeah, Copiel. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
really. Yeah,
he's
really, really
fantastic.
good. Yeah, he's excellent. And Call the Calvary. Yeah, it's appropriately named. Again, I don't. The one thing that DC that has been amiss, with their, I think generally speaking, with the exception of Justice League, with the backup of Justice League Dark, I've found that the backup features in these DC titles should probably not. They shouldn't. We don't need a backup. I don't think we've needed a backup in a lot of these titles, to be quite blunt. The only time that it's actually worked is with Justice League, where the backup is actually better than the main title. Poor Bendis. But in any event, but when the art is this good and the writing is pretty good, and this is something, the Calvary, this storyline, I would expect to see in a Batman Black and White, and but I guess the yellow disqualified it on the word boxes there. But in
Yeah,
any
maybe.
event,
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing about Justice League Dark, though. It was its own title previously. None of the rest of these really were. So
right.
you wonder if that, and it really should be. But
It's a good
I don't
point.
know. Maybe with Discovery, I guess it's going to be called Discovery, or Warner Brothers Discovery, I think is what I saw the new company's going to be called. Anyway, maybe they'll make a change. Who knows? That's probably at least a year away. Anyway, on to Rorschach number 9, written by Tom King. Art is by Jorge Fornes. Colors by Dave Stewart. Clayton Cal handles the letters. We're getting down. This is issue number 9. We're getting down to the end of the story. Rocky, what'd you think of this one?
It's funny. I actually, I read this. I enjoyed it, and then it suddenly hit me that I don't have much to say about it. I actually have one line written. I did prepare. Yeah, I do some prep work when I prepare for these reviews that you and I do. But on this one, I got one line, and the one line, I'm going to read it. It says, "So it looks like the Redfords campaign manager may have tried to hire Myerson and the Laura girl to kill Turley after all." That's really all I got out of this story.
Yeah.
That's really all I got, and yet, if I say it that way, I'm doing a disservice to the narrative, because what Tom King manages to do is that this does read like it's episodic. Each individual issue is like an episode if this was a series on Netflix or Amazon Prime or what have you. And it's the art is so well done by Jorge Fornes. It's really good. I'm gonna try to bring up some of the art here for those not listening to the podcast and on the channel. But this is some of the transitions are so well done that, like, you really get a sense of the you really get a handle on the detective, because the approach taken by King is that the detective is actually walking through the farmyard or the acreage where this Laura girl was raised, and where they trained, where her and William Myerson, where they trained and they did their practice shooting, planning for their assassination attempt. And as he's looking at the scene, that's juxtaposed and flashback as a flashback with conversations between Laura and William Myerson. And just when we think we got a handle on the narrative in the previous issues, now we got other suspects that maybe now Redford, the other candidate, did hire somebody to take out Tillerson, because Tillerson was kind of looking like the bad guy at the beginning, that somebody that you almost wished in an earlier issue when the detective interviewed the presidential candidate Tillerson, he was kind of a jerk, and you kind of wish that the assassination attempt by Myerson and Laura was successful, but it wasn't. And here now we're getting more clues that sort of muddy the waters, but we get these beautiful illustrations, and it's funny. I remember we recall with Heroes in Crisis, or where we maybe had the famous 9-panel grids or what have you with Tom King. Here we get four panel grid. We get multiple. We get an interplay of that, but the color palette and the color tones and the flashback sequences, the colorist there. Who is the colorist on this, by the way? I forget. Dave Stewart. Fantastic. Yep. Because the tone that is set, you really get a sense, because you can almost, it's easy to do a transition from scene to scene, because when there's a flashback, when it's in the past, when it's the present, and it really helps with the narrative, because you really get there's even a great scene where in one of the flashbacks, Laura, the girl who was sort of like raised and sort of brainwashed by her father to believe that these alien squids were taking over the mines, and her father was crazy, and they believe in this conspiracy theory that the squids are trying to control the minds of mankind, humanity, and Tillerson was part of it, and they had to take him out. And at one point she actually shoots a watchman symbol, the smiley face, on the ground, and you see a bullet hole in the head of the. It's just beautifully done. And so, every now and then we get those reminders from King that this is a Watchmen tale after all, and just great setting there. Again, it's not much happens here. So if like I said from the beginning, I get a 1-line synopsis as to what happens. Not much happens, but everything is in the pages. Everything is in the imagery, and in the dialogue. And it's funny, even the detective, in the scenes with the detective pretty much only says one word in every scene he's in, and it's hum, like HM, like Rorschach used to always say he'd always say that, that Rorschach, that hum. The detective is doing that, much like Rorschach did, because he's always contemplating, he's thinking. That's how Rorschach, you could tell that Rorschach was onto something or reflecting on something important. It was that, And the detective is doing that here, and I think that's very intentional on King's part, but it's all in the visuals when you see that. So, again, when I summarize it, and I think the danger here, if I was to summarize this for somebody, you'd think that nothing happens, but there's a lot here. There's a lot of character work here, but a lot of it you don't appreciate until you see the art by Fornes here. He made this issue because not a lot happens, but I got to say, this is one issue where the art pulled me into the story. And while a lot of it is repetitive and it's just reinforcing what we already know about these characters, it's adding an element of mystery. And it just worked for me, man. It just worked for me. And I can't believe I'm doing this again, but I got to give Tom King, I guess I got to give Jorge Fornes the ultimate compliment here, because he kept me in this story from what, at the end of the day, didn't have a lot of substance, but the substance comes from the art and the imagery.
Yeah, I agree. We know this is in the world of Watchmen, and technically only Dr. Manhattan has superpowers there, but I found myself wondering, just the way the story is structured in terms of the art, with the detective who's walking around this farm out in the middle of nowhere, which I don't even know why you call it a farm. It's out in the desert. They're not growing anything.
Sorry, my
except
fault.
maybe except well, no, I mean that's what the guys called it. The three witnesses that were interviewed last issue were called it that as well, but it's not. It's not a farm unless they're growing paranoid delusions of squids taking over your brain. But as he's in these places, in these locations on this farm, it's almost like he's clairvoyant or something. He's seeing these psychic flashbacks of the past, these interactions between the girl and Meyerson, the kid and Meyerson, and what they were talking about and how they were planning on assassinating Turley. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, the big reveal in the issue is that they were actually hired by Redford's campaign, which is obviously a big bombshell. And what the detective's going to do with that remains to be seen. But this is probably, you mentioned the idea of a procedural, and this issue is probably the most sort of CSI or Criminal Minds, or the most sort of CBS television network procedural feeling of any of the issues so far. It's definitely the detective going around at this farmhouse and putting the clues together, and it's great to see him work. And you do sort of wonder, could he, is it a supernatural ability? Is it some kind of superpower? Probably not, being that it's in the world of the Watchmen, but he certainly knows his stuff as he's using, means of deduction and whatnot. And I am sort of surprised that Tom King didn't choose to make the blood stain into any sort of pattern that's sort of Watchmen-esque. I guess it would have been a little bit too on the nose, I suppose. But yeah, this is a masterpiece. This is fantastic. And I enjoyed it. It's definitely putting more of the mystery to bed. We have confirmation that the Redford campaign, at least if not Redford himself, were involved in this assassination attempt. And what is that going to do for the Turley campaign? What does it bode for the future of the series? No, there's 3 issues left. And I still sort of feel like, much like his Batman Catwoman series, I'm not sure yet what the point, like, what are we trying to solve here? What is the point of this series? I mean, even the fact that it's called Rorschach and it doesn't have the original Rorschach, it's an old washed up comic creator who's dressing up as Rorschach. Yeah, what exactly is Tom King trying to say here? What is this story trying to do? But it's a credit to King and Fornes and their technical ability and the color work of Dave Stewart, which is exceptional. Probably his best work, maybe with the exception of Gideon Falls. And if I had to pick which of those that his color work works better in, I'd probably have to give it a tie. I don't know that one is better than the other, but it's Dave Stewart at the top of his game. But everybody, technically, this is a perfectly done comic in terms of how it's technically executed, from King, from Jorge Fornes, from Dave Stewart, from Clayton Cowles, the letterer. It's perfect. So,
yeah.
Whether or not you enjoy the story and can get invested in it and whether it's for you, that's a completely different conversation. But in terms of how this comic is technically put together, it's absolutely perfect in my mind. So really, really good stuff. Very much looking forward to the end of Rorschach. 3 issues to go. All right, up next we have Detective Comics number 1037, The Neighborhood Part 4, written by Marika Tamaki. Pencils are by Viktor Bogdanovic. So this is the first one of the issues not by Dan Mora. Probably needed an issue to get caught up. Jonathan Glapion and Viktor Bogdanovic on inks. Jordi Belair on colors. Aditya Bidikar on letters. And I do sort of want, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but Detective Comics is still coming out twice a month, right?
Yeah, I believe it is. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, they really need to go to once a month on these books. And not that Viktor Bogdanovic is a bad artist by any stretch of imagination. I love Viktor's work. I have over my shoulder, I don't know if you can see it. No, I guess you can't. But I have a piece of his original art hanging up on my wall, and it's from a Suicide Squad Black Files issue where it's Deadshot's first kill ever, where he kills his father. So I absolutely love Viktor's art. It's fantastic. But I just, and not even for that reason that I want to keep Dan Mora on the book every week, but I just want to make sure that we're getting the highest quality story, which means we need to go once a month. That's hard enough for these guys to do at this point. Also, it's easier in my wallet. There's a couple backups. One is Gotham Has Heart, which is sort of apparently this journalist, Deb Donovan, giving her opinions on the way Gotham is now. I didn't really know what the point of the story was, but I'll talk about it more in a minute. But that's also written by Mariko Tamaki. The art there is by Carl Mostert, colors by Jordi Belair, and letters by Rob Lee. And then there's a second backup called 3 Minutes that's written by John Ridley that actually stars Batman, not the Jace Fox version, but the real Batman and Robin, Dick Grayson version. The art is by Dustin Wynn, colors by John Kalish, and letters by Tom Napolitano. So as far as the main story, yeah, I thought the art by Vic Bogdanovic was absolutely fantastic. And his art is similar enough to Dan Mora that I don't think it'll be jarring when it's collected in trade or anything like that. But it is very clearly not Dan Mora's art. But it still is great. As far as the narrative, yeah, I kind of feel like Rocky felt about Rorschach. Not much happened here except for Bruce Wayne gets arrested, and then Sam Worth tries to kill him, basically. And so this is a character. The way you feel about Punchline is the way I feel about Worth. Like, he's a moron. Okay, you're a moron. Like, I understand you're distraught because your daughter was killed, but just because Bruce Wayne got arrested, and it doesn't even seem to be a valid arrest because they have no proof whatsoever. So you hear that Wayne's arrested and you're just going to go and kill him? You have no proof. You're completely off the rails. You're just an idiot. And this is a character I loved. Like, immediately just despised him from the moment he appeared in Detective Comics. I have no respect for somebody who's as stupid as he is. You wonder, how did you become this big shot, corrupt construction company owner that's got his hands on all these dirty deals in Gotham if you're really this stupid? Because he really comes across as impulsive and dumb and, fly off the handle. And to me, none of those things speak to being able to control a criminal organization. And maybe it's just because he is so distraught because his daughter's dead and this isn't how he normally acts. But this characterization, this character, this person, yeah, can't stand him. Can't stand him. He's an idiot. And I hope Bruce Wayne kicks the crap out of him, basically. So it's well-paced. It's sort of an action-packed issue. But again, there's not a whole heck of a lot of story here in terms of the main book. Oracle's investigating the whole parasite thing. Wayne gets arrested. And then Worth blows up the police station that he's in. And Bruce escapes. That's basically the whole story. So not much happening in terms of the main story. And again, that kind of goes back to my point about making this a monthly book. We'd get a bigger chunk of story. It's almost like, well, maybe based on pacing and whatnot, Tamaki didn't have a lot here that she needed to cover in this particular issue. I found that to be the case when Action Comics came back in Rebirth, and it felt like Dan Jurgens was stretching the story out, and we got like an issue and a half worth of story every month instead of 2 full issues. That feels like sort of the same thing here. I will say that the variant cover by Lee Bermejo is maybe my favorite variant he's done so far. Like, I love the green tint. I think it's absolutely spectacular. Um, so yeah, I mean, Detective Comics is still my favorite of the Bat books. I like it better than the Batman book that Tynion's doing. Um, so I'm enjoying it, but I hope Sam Worth gets his ass kicked, basically. So, what did you think of the main story, Rocky?
Well, first, I thought it was hilarious. One of my favorite scenes was the interrogation scene with Bruce Wayne, and Bruce Wayne. I think Tamaki does a great job of showing Bruce Wayne as kind of a little bit of a. He really is. He's the perfect playboy, and his alibi is a woman, and his alibi it's so perfect. He asks for a phone call. His alibi is a woman that he slept with. He was with a woman the night before, so he couldn't have been responsible for Lydia's death. And of course, what's hilarious here is that you could tell that the cops interrogating him believe him that he was with the woman the before, and they also believe him that he doesn't remember the name of the woman he was with the night before. Because it's Bruce Wayne. Of course Bruce Wayne has slept with a woman. Of course his alibi is he's sleeping with a woman. Of course he doesn't remember her name. And the brilliance of it is that he's got a call into Oracle, and even though none of this was explicitly stated in it, you just know that Oracle already has a name to give him. She's already probably established his alibi somehow. And there's a certain brilliance to that, a brilliant simplicity to it. This isn't rocket science storytelling, yet at the same time, I want to give Tamaki credit because this is very, very believable. If anybody, I mean, how tropey is that? Well, no, it couldn't have been me who did the murder. I was with a girl last night. For most of us, that would be like, yeah, right, prove that. But for Bruce Wayne, that's like, of course he was with a woman the night before. It's Bruce Wayne. And of course, we know that in reality, Bruce Wayne doesn't sleep with a hell of a lot of women, quite frankly. Batman maybe does, but, in any event, I really like that. I thought it worked very well because to me, a lot of that was funny for reasons that had to do with what we know about the character. It didn't even have to be explicitly stated. So I give Tamaki credit for that scene because I thought it was just great. I agree with you on Mr. Worth. I thought he was a little bit maybe overly psychotic. I also thought it was very unrealistic. If Mr. Worth literally fires a military rocket at the precinct and it doesn't kill Bruce Wayne, who's in prison, who's a prisoner in the basement, I thought that was very hard to believe that Bruce Wayne could survive that. I know he's Batman, of course, but I mean, still, I thought that was very convenient. Bruce Wayne could see through Oracle's help, I guess, that Mr. Worth was going to fire a military, missile at him, but still, I thought that was a little bit forced. I don't see, but I mean, that's I'm nitpicking, whatever. This is a man who is a corrupt criminal mobster, guy who is corrupt dealing with construction, and he loses his daughter. I can buy into. I'm more forgiving than you are, Jace, in terms of I can buy into the fact that maybe he's gotten a little bit psychotic, and he's lost his daughter, and he's insane with grief and anger, and he's blaming Bruce Wayne just because Bruce Wayne happens to be arrested, so he's blaming Bruce Wayne. Also, we should not forget that there's a legitimate reason to suspect that Bruce Wayne is a prime suspect because there's at least 3 members who live in Bruce Wayne's neighborhood, and they're all women, and they all end up dead. And Bruce Wayne is a well-known socialite. So it makes sense that Bruce Wayne would be a person of interest. So as insane as Mr. Worth, as insane with grief as Mr. Worth is, it's not implausible that he would be very angry with Bruce Wayne and that the police would interrogate Bruce Wayne. So I like the way Tamaki set this up. It was, on the surface, it seems very simplistic, but the way it played out, dialogue-wise and everything else, I got some good humorous moments out of this. And yeah, I thought it was pretty good. Like you said, Jace, it's another example. It's just like Rorschach. Not a heck of a lot happens in this issue, but there's fun to be had. There's a lot of action here. It was action-packed. There was good moments. I like the fact that we dealt with Bruce Wayne. We're dealing with Bruce Wayne's life. This is the way that Batman's going to get out of this. No. Bruce Wayne has to get out of this. This is Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne's ability to be Batman only gets him so far. We only see Batman on the final panel here. when ultimately he's chased down into the sewers. Mr. Worth chases Bruce Wayne after the explosion of the of the precinct. He is chased into the I guess the mini caves of Gotham, which Bruce Wayne has converted into Batman mini caves, I guess they're calling them, or micro caves, micro bat caves they're calling them. But anyways, I had fun with this issue, despite the fact that maybe not a lot happened, but I will give Tamaki credit that this was fun. I enjoyed this issue. I really enjoyed it.
I don't know. I get your point about, yeah, there's been 3 people missing in the neighborhood of Bruce Wayne, and he does know a lot of people and gets around, and so he would be a suspect. But I feel like there's got to be other people in that neighborhood that would be suspects as well. And there was one point when I was reading this where I felt like, I guess when it was announced that he was arrested, I'm like, okay, does anybody remember like who framed Bruce Wayne for murder when he, Bruce Wayne fugitive storyline? Like,
Yeah.
don't, I mean, I get it. These characters are around for decades and decades. It's hard not to repeat yourself, but does nobody in Gotham remember that? Like, if you're going to arrest Bruce Wayne because you think he killed people, you better have some damn good evidence, because he's Bruce Wayne. And even if he doesn't have his fortune, he's still going to have plenty of people that want to defend him,
Yeah.
and he's going to get off. He's going to be found innocent. So, I won't fault Tamaki necessarily, but it just felt kind of like, really, you're going to arrest Bruce Wayne for murder? You better have more than what we're told here, which is basically nothing, circumstantial at best. Oh, somebody heard you arguing with her and she ended up dead. Okay. Any physical evidence of her being in the house? No. Anybody see anything? No. Did you bother to check Bruce Wayne's alibi? No. Yeah, it seems a little.
Yeah.
I
But
don't know.
it is worth noting, though. It's worth noting what Tamaki has to do here in order to tie this into Future State, because in Future State, it's Bruce Wayne that is chased down. It's somebody discovers that Bruce Wayne is Batman. It's Bruce Wayne when Batman is in quotations here murdered in Future State, and the reason why people think that Batman is dead in Future State is that it's basically Bruce Wayne is hunted down and purportedly killed, and of course the people that know Bruce Wayne, the Bat family, know that if Bruce Wayne is dead, Batman's dead. And so this is an attack not only on the personal integrity and the reputation of Bruce Wayne, but also Batman. Because remember, in earlier issues, Batman was a person of interest. Now Bruce Wayne is a person of interest. So this is attacking the integrity of both Bruce Wayne and Batman leading into Future State. So it's consistent in that regard. So there
Yeah,
is
that's
some
true.
consistency there.
Yeah, it's true. I guess it goes back to my desire to have Future State not exist, and that is sort of plays along with something we didn't mention earlier when we were talking about the the Future State Gotham book. In terms of, okay, how's this all going to play out, and is it actually going to lead to Future State? But I can't imagine that dystopian future is going to come to pass, and how far down the line do they have to get us, and that sort of thing. So um, anyway, the first backup that I mentioned, where it's just narrated by this reporter, I don't understand what its purpose is. Gotham Has Heart, story by Deb Donovan, and she's basically attending this fundraiser for a children's wing hospital, and she's basically calling out the wealthy of Gotham, saying that they only do these things to show up and appear to care, when really they don't. And if people really want to survive the violence and corruption that permeates the city, they're going to have to kind of pull themselves up by their bootstraps and take care of things themselves instead of depending on other people. But that's not anything original or new. So again, I feel like, what's the point of that story? And then the other backup story, which is called 3 Minutes by John Ridley and Dustin Nguyen, is so beating you over the head to make this retcon of why Lucius Fox feels the way that he does in Future State. And it feels so wildly out of character. Frankly, it feels insulting. It feels really insulting. This is so out of character for who Lucius Fox has always been. And now, because they want to Ridley wants to tell a different story about the Fox family, that they've got to go back and retcon, because again, this is a story of Batman and Robin, Dick Grayson Robin. So it's early much earlier in Batman's career than, current times or anything we saw in Future State. And so I'm supposed to believe that Lucius Fox works for Bruce Wayne and works for Batman and is his armorer and helps him out and provides all this. But the only reason Lucius Fox is doing it is because he's there to protect the other members of the Bat family. So it's like he fundamentally disagrees with what Bruce does. He even says that this won't end with Robin. This won't end with Bruce just recruiting one Robin. Batman's going to lure more people into this cult. He calls it a cult.
Yeah.
This is honestly, I'm insulted by this. And then at the end, instead of getting an end, it says at the beginning. Yeah, I like I said, I don't have anything else to say about it other than I'm insulted. This is really lazy, and I'm sorry, John Ridley. I know you're a talented writer, but if the history of Batman and the history and the characterization of Bruce Wayne and Lucius Fox and the rest of the Bat family doesn't fit the narrative that you want to tell, you got to figure out a different way to do it. You can't go back and fundamentally change the character of Lucius Fox, because that's basically what he's done here. He's basically turned Lucius Fox into somebody who he calls what Bruce Wayne is doing a cult. No, yeah. I don't like it, and I would argue with anybody who says that this is good storytelling and good characterization for Lucius Fox. No, it's lazy, it's insulting, and it's wrong. It's wrong on all levels. And I don't know why anybody at DC editorial allowed this to be published, frankly. Well, it's the worst thing I've read in a long time. Like, I really vehemently disagree with this story. So
well, I would just I think maybe just to give you a little bit of pushback on what you're saying there, and maybe hopefully give you some reason to hope that this story is not as bleak as you've originally interpreted it. I didn't interpret it quite that harshly. Yes, he did refer to the Bat family as a cult, but by one interpretation, I don't think that's necessarily a crazy interpretation. It is at a certain level insane that Bruce Wayne would take people under his ward and train them to fight criminals and put themselves in harm's way all the time.
That's not my argument, Rocky. My argument is that Lucius Fox has never been portrayed as believing that. Because I agree with you on the face of it. Yes, you could see that. The point is that Lucius Fox has never expressed that or been characterized that way. Well, whether or not, that's a completely different argument.
Fair enough, and and I admire your passion on this. I would just say to you that we haven't gotten a hell of a lot of stories with Lucius Fox, quite bluntly, and now, by the way, I believe it or not, I actually side more with you on this, but I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt on this, and what I think's occurring here is because we're in the DC Omniverse, and because we're sort of like there's some rewriting going on. And a reimagining of certain key characters, because we're trying to bring these heretofore other characters that haven't had as much limelight in the past. I think this is an attempt to try to make them more interesting. And I will say this, that if this is indeed is the characterization that they're going with Lucius Fox, and it appears that they are, that he felt this way from an early for many, many years, possibly a decade, because this is going back a while, that despite him feeling that way, Lucius Fox was still always somebody that was loyal to Bruce Wayne. He was still somebody that Bruce Wayne could depend on, and that Bruce Wayne, Batman, continued to depend on, and he never broke or violated any of Batman's secrets. So I think that...
Yeah, but he says right there in the story, he says, I'm not doing it for Bruce. So you're right. He did stay loyal, and he did provide Bruce with whatever he needed as Batman. But he says right there in the story, I'm not doing it for Bruce. I have to stay to protect Richard and whoever comes after him. Someone has to be here to protect them.
Well, I think that's an interesting take. I just think that that's an interesting take on the character, that you can still side on the side of justice and but you can ultimately be on the same side as Batman, but for very different reasons. And I think it adds an element of complexity, and he's more interesting to me, Lucius Fox, with this take than he was in the past. just being a glorified Black Alfred, to be blunt. Because
No,
that's how I've always thought him.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree more. I talked about it in Future State. I have no interest in the Fox family. I think Ridley is oversimplifying things and basically rewriting history, and it doesn't sit well with me. If he wanted to do that, I think again he could have found a different way. I think this is just being lazy, and it's him changing these characters around to suit his own agenda. Which I get it. If you have something you're trying to say about either persons of color or justice or whatever, and you want to use the comic medium to do it, I have no problem with that. Come up with new characters. Don't corrupt old characters. And you're right. Like Lucius Fox, we didn't get a lot of him, but whatever we got, I always liked the character. I always respected him, and I felt like he was on the side of the angels, and that he did have love for Bruce Wayne in a lot of the same ways that Alfred did. And this paints it in a completely different picture, and it makes him seem manipulative, and he has no loyalty to Bruce. He has no loyalty to the mission or to Batman. It's all about, in his own words, I'm here to protect the insanity of this cult that Bruce is bringing along. And it speaks poorly to me of who Lucius Fox is. If you're really diametrically opposed to what Bruce is doing by endangering these people, why did you do it? Why did you stick with him? Why did you run his company for all those years? Frankly, instead of, I think, doing what Ridley is attempting to do, which is make a Lucius, some sort of principled guy who, is there to protect the Bat family, it weakens the character by saying, okay, he didn't believe in this, so he basically was a two-faced traitor to Bruce Wayne all this time, and it also colors everything in terms of where the characters are now, that Lucius Fox has all of Bruce Wayne's money. Are we going to find out that Lucius Fox was in on it with the Joker to get the Bruce Wayne fortune in the first place so that he could hopefully stop being Batman and stop endangering these kids? Is that who Lucius Fox is? Lucius Fox Amanda Waller in disguise? Has he become an out-and-out villain?
You said it, I didn't.
I like Lucius Fox, okay?
Yeah,
I like him as a character. And yes, maybe he hasn't gotten enough, time in the sun, which has allowed Ridley to, corrupt him like this in my mind. And that bothers me. But I just,
I will say this, Jace. I will say that, the angle upon which we've had this friendly debate on this subject is that I based upon what you just told me and my own opinion, I'm more interested in Lucius Fox than ever before. I think he's more complex than we heretofore thought, and I just err on the side of optimism where you're a little bit more pessimistic, and I think he's very interesting. In particular, when you factor in the reality that, here's a guy that he's got all these principles, but there is a degree of hypocrisy and I think you've identified that, Jace, very clearly. There's a degree of hypocrisy in Lucius Fox's thinking, which is magnified by our foreknowledge that his own children, one of them will become Batman one day. So I think that there's a certain narrative poetry to that, and a certain amount of, be careful what you fight against, because in this case, his offspring becomes the very thing that he might resent. And in fact, we know that Lucius Fox, from the pages of Future State, has a problematic relationship with his own children, and maybe that's the reason why, or maybe that plays part of it is because of his dire need to protect Robin, and yet he failed to protect his own children, one of them from becoming Batman himself. So I think there's an interesting element here that I don't know if it was maybe it was by accident as opposed to design, but I'm actually interested in Lucius Fox now, and it's all your fault.
I think it's shameful. I think it's shameful that John Ridley would disparage Morgan Freeman this way. That's not right. So that's all. In the infamous words of Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about that. So let's move on to more Batman, because no, we're not done yet. We have not one, but two more Batman books to talk about. Very Batman heavy week. Up next is Batman the Detective #3, written by Tom Taylor, pencils by Andy Kubert, inks by Sandra Hope, colors by Brad Anderson, letters by Clem Robbins. This was a really great issue. What did you think, Rock?
Oh man, sorry, I just I'm handling the imagery here, so I got to get my bearings straight. I've I've been loving this Tom Taylor. I've been on I don't know what it is, man. I've been on a Tom Taylor love fest for quite a while, and I know uh, I've been loving this Batman the Detective. It's actually what, in fact, I think I haven't actually consciously thought about what my favorite Batman comic is right now, because in fact, even in August, the solicits, I think it's, what is it, 40% of all DC titles are going to be Batman related come August. It's just insane. But
yep,
I'm really enjoying what Tom Taylor's doing here, and I think I've enjoyed this perhaps a little bit more than yourself has. But I really love this issue, Batman the Detective. This the central premise of this is an older Batman. It's drawn by Andy Kubert, and those of you who love the Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns, Andy Kubert has sort of a Frank Miller-esque sort of style. And what really works here is that takes place sometime in the future, where it's a sort of an older, grittier Bruce Wayne who's lost all contact with members of the Bat family, and some villain out there is out there killing off every person that Batman has ever saved in his career. Somebody is killing them off one by one. And Batman is going on an international sort of manhunt to find out who it is, and he ends up in Paris, France. And Henri Ducard is someone who, as a young Bruce Wayne, he got trained by Henri Ducard, and Henri Ducard was somebody who could find anybody. And this issue is essentially, almost the entire issue was a flashback to when a young Bruce Wayne met Henri Ducard and Ducart, and just it's an interesting origin story, and I love that. I'm always a sucker for a story, and we get them once in a while. I would like to see more of them. I would like to see more stories where we get a young Bruce Wayne being trained by all these people. When Bruce Wayne traveled the world and he learned to become Batman, he had all the best people in all the fields train him the best, trained his mind, trained his body, and Henri Ducard was one of those individuals who trained him to be a very good detective, and trained him to find anybody. And what I love about this issue is that it goes through various. I'm gonna try to just let me bring it up here. There are various scenes where sorry where last issue ended, just to be clear, where Henri Ducard, they were attacked by this group of terrorists that are basically trying to take out all the people that Batman saved. Well, they tried to kill Henri Ducard, and so Batman basically takes him to the hospital, and then as Ducard is in the hospital recovering, the readers were given a flashback to a young Bruce Wayne looking for Henri Ducard when he was younger, a 17-year-old Bruce Wayne. And I love the characterization here. I love this issue. And just the arrogance, the youthful arrogance of Bruce Wayne wanting to protect, hating guns. A young Bruce Wayne saves Henri Ducard from a would-be assassin, and Henri Ducard, helping Bruce Wayne, training him. So he spends years. We don't know how long, but we're assuming at least 6 months to a year being under the tutelage of Henri Ducard, and ultimately, this young Bruce Wayne finds out the hard way that Ducard has a different moral code than he does, and it's just full props are to Tom Taylor, because you really get a sense of just how intelligent Henri Ducard is. Ducard knows right away that this young 17-year-old Bruce Wayne is somebody who's lost somebody, he's trying to deal with that loss in the only way he knows how. He's someone who hates guns, and he's very passionate, and And Henri Ducard knows that this young Bruce Wayne is somebody very different than what he's used to. And he knows that this Bruce Wayne is special. But Bruce Wayne also learned something from Henri Ducard. He learned something about having a base of operations, about having a network of friends. And that, one of my favorite lines is when Henri Ducard tells him that, you got to have a lot of friends. And Bruce Wayne says, you don't have a lot of friends. You buy all your friends. You pay for all your friends, or they pay you. And he says to them, look, some of my best friends are people who are my best customers. I mean, it's about establishing contacts any way you can. That's how you got to make it. And you can see the links between Henri Ducard's style and Batman's. But of course, the primary difference is that, as is revealed in the issue, is Henri Ducard is not afraid to he uses lethal force. And that's really driven home at a scene where Bruce Wayne gets careless and he gets caught by the very person he's following, and he ends up being saved by Henri Ducard, but Ducard ultimately ends up killing the person that they were looking for. And that leads, of course, that severs the relationship between Wayne and Ducard. And that really brings things into the present, because it establishes the relationship that they have. And there's also a scene, flashback 10 years after that, where Ducard and Batman, they defuse a nuclear bomb under the streets of London. I mean, there's a lot of action here. It's action-packed, and we're really getting the history of these two characters. And I got to tell you something, for people that don't know a lot about Batman's history, Henri Ducard might not be a character that a lot of people are familiar with, but you're going to get everything you need to know about Henri Ducard in this issue. And dare I say, I think you're going to like it. I think he's a likable character in his own way, because Ducard might be a killer at heart, but he does it for money, but he also, I think he loves Bruce Wayne. I think he cares for Bruce. He just genuinely has a different moral code, and he respects him. And I really love this issue. And at the end here, when Bruce Wayne surrenders to authorities, I love the thoughts that go through Bruce Wayne's head. Should I surrender to authorities? Should I escape? And he decides to surrender because he wants to find out what's going on. Why do the police want to, why do they want to talk to me? And of course, they end up arresting him for the murder of Henri Ducard, who, as far as I know, we didn't know he died. Bruce had taken him to the hospital. Batman had taken him to the hospital. But now apparently perhaps he's dead. But it's teasing that the next issue we're going to get an interrogation scene with the police and Bruce Wayne. And I'm looking forward to that. And if it's half as good as the interrogation scene we got in the Tamaki written Detective Comics, I'm looking forward to that. So again, I don't know, man. Maybe DC publishes too much Batman, but when Batman's this good all around, I'm, like I said, I got no problem with it. What do you think, Chase?
Yeah, I didn't like it as much as you did. I did think it was good. I particularly enjoyed the flashback scenes to Henri training Bruce, which I agree we haven't gotten enough of those type of stories. But yeah, I mean, Bruce Wayne's arrested in Detective Comics and being interrogated. Now we've got Bruce Wayne arrested here in Detective, going to be interrogated. We got Nightwing being interrogated. The police all of a sudden are the bad guys, which I guess, again, reflecting society and our reality of our changed world. People don't trust the police anymore. Really, you've never been able to trust the Gotham City PD with the level of corruption, but apparently you can't trust the police in Bloodhaven or France either. I don't think Henri Ducard is dead. I think, if anything, he wants whoever was trying to kill him, these people that are out there picking off the people that have been saved by Batman over the years. I think Henri Ducard wants them to believe that he's dead, and he probably has arranged himself for Bruce to be arrested. That would not surprise me in the slightest if that's his plan. And if Bruce pushes back on that at all, Henri is going to say, hey, I did you a favor. Now we can say, hey, Bruce is off the table. He's sitting in a jail cell somewhere, and you can operate more freely as Batman and do whatever you need to do to solve this mystery. That's my guess of what's going to happen. But again, we'll have to see how it all plays out. So I don't have much more to add to what you already said. I think you covered it. The art is spectacular. It is an older Batman. He does have that kind of heft, that weight to him. So he's much bigger and blockier than we've ever seen him before. And I think it works for this story. once again, I'll give a lot of credit to Sandra Hope's inks over the line work of Kubert here. Brings the art to life very, very well. But in a way, there's not a heck of a lot that happens here to move our current narrative forward, because the majority of the issues spent in those flashback scenes, which are fantastic. I honestly would love a, like, I don't know, 6, 8, 12 issue miniseries with a young Bruce Wayne and an Henri Ducard traveling around the world, manhunting. I would be all in for that. That would be
That'd be great.
fantastic. Yeah, that would be really, really cool. So, I really enjoy this. It's just further proof that it doesn't matter what character Tom Taylor's writing. The guy's a hell of a talent. So, all right, well, on to the next Batman book, Batman Urban Legends #4. We've got 4 stories here. We've got part 4 of 6 of the Cheers storyline, or Cheer, rather, storyline from writer Chip Zdarsky, with art by Eddie Barrows and Eber Ferreira. Marcus Toe handles the flashbacks, Adriana Lucas on colors, Becca Carey on letters. We've also got part 4 of 5 of The Long Con. That's the Grifter storyline, written by Matthew Rosenberg, art by Ryan Benjamin, Antonio Fabella on colors, and Seda Timofonte on letters. And then we've got a standalone Batwing story, which it was great to see Luke Fox back as Batwing. It's written by Camrus Johnson. Pencils are by Louisa Mikazi. Trevor Scott on inks. Andrew Dahlhaus does the colors. And then we've got part 1 of 3, a Tim Drake story called Some of Our Parts, written by Megan Fitzmartin, art by Belen Ortega, colors by Alejandro Sanchez, and letters by Pat Brousseau. And I'll just point out that Megan Fitzmartin, that's the same writer who wrote the Robin Eternal storyline in Future State, that starred Tim Drake when he became immortal. And there was a reference to that, Tim Drake being immortal, in the Future State Gotham issue 2 that we talked about earlier. So clearly she loves herself some Tim Drake, and she's continuing that love by bringing him to a 3-part story in Batman Urban Legends. So, but the first story is that Chip Zdarsky story, Cheer, talking about the cheer drops. And we saw last issue that Jason Todd and Batman had agreed to sort of set aside their differences and sort of investigate for the sake of getting these cheer drops off the street, and hoping to find a solution for this little boy who Tim Drake murdered the guy's father. Although the argument could be made it was in self-defense. But anyway, he gets a lead and he goes to the building after having a disagreement with Batman. Batman's like, we need to go and look at the information we have. We do our hunting at night, not during the day. Jason Todd, ever the hothead, didn't want to do that. Goes to this building and gets attacked by Mr. Freeze. So we see their battle here, all the while Jason Todd thinking back to that fateful day where he met Joker and a crowbar, and not in a good way. And so that shows us that Jason Todd does have the ability to grow, and that's great that Zdarsky does that here. He basically shows us that when Jason feels that he's out of his depth and he needs help, he actually calls out to he calls Oracle, hey, I need Batman's help. I need Bruce Wayne's help. I would argue that's very much character growth for who Jason Todd is. We talked about it when we were talking about Future State Gotham, about how most of the time he tries to go it on his own. But unfortunately, it seems like by calling out to Batman for help, he's sort of played right into Mr. Freeze's hands, because that's exactly what Freeze wanted him to do, so they could capture Batman. So there's a couple issues left of this story, a couple more parts. This is part 4 of 6, as I said, and how Mr. Freeze ties into the cheer drops, because I thought that we thought it was Scarecrow, and then maybe it's not Scarecrow, maybe it's Mr. Freeze. Like, what exactly is going on with the cheer drops? What is going on with Mr. Freeze? We don't yet know, but it's clear that Zdarsky is attempting to explore the relationship between Jason Todd and Batman, which I find really interesting, because we talked at length about it when we talked about the Future State issue, Future State Gotham #2. And I wonder if this is some editorial, I went to Zdarsky and said, hey, can you write a story that explores Jason Todd and Bruce Wayne's relationship? Because it seems like we're getting a lot of that over in Future State Gotham as well. So I just find that interesting. Maybe we are headed down the path that I was talking about of redemption for Jason Todd, or bringing him back into the Bat family, or just changing up his status quo a little bit so that he's not quite the black sheep of the Batman family, as it were. But I've said before, Zardasky, he writes some of the most emotional stories in all of comics, and this is no exception. I thought this was fantastic. This Batman Urban Legends, I wasn't 100% sure when they announced it. I'm like, really, more Batman content? But the thing is, we don't get a lot of Batman. We're getting so much more of the other characters. And between this Teardrop storyline and the Long Con Grifter story, I could read installments. I could read stories with these characters by these creative teams like indefinitely. I'm going to be sad when this Teardrops and the Long Con storylines end, because they've been fantastic. Like, you want to talk about what my favorite Batman book is right now? It's Batman Urban Legends. Yeah. Because these are the best stories of the Bat family, without question. This is better than Batman. This is better than Detective. Better than Tom Taylor's Batman book. These two stories, the Red Hood story and the Grifter story, are the best Bat family stories coming out right now from Zardasky and Rosenberg, respectively.
I completely agree. One of the most, I think the most poignant scene for me, and I have it up on the screen for those who are not watching this as a podcast or listening to this as a podcast, but when Oracle contacts Batman and says to him, Batman, Jason needs you. Jason never, he asked for you, Bruce. He asked for Batman. And all Batman says is understood. And especially for us long-term readers, what is so impactful about that scene is that we also understand exactly what's going on. That for Jason Todd to ask for help, it's serious. For Jason to ask for help from Batman, it's serious. That this is that Jason Todd would crawl over a mile of broken glass on his knees before he would ever ask for help from anyone, especially Batman. He's asking for help from Batman. This is serious. And this reminded me, when I saw this scene, of, and I know what this is a different scene, but it reminded me of a scene from Identity Crisis where Batman and Robin were trying to get to the scene to save who was it? They were trying to save oh man,
Jean Loring.
Thank you, Jean Loring. Anyways, yeah, but it's just poignant, and the way that this scene is played out, Zardasky is. He's so good at this. He did the same thing with Life Story with Spider-Man. He comes in, he tells just snapshots of various periods of time in the life of Spider-Man, and absolutely nailed it. And of course, that's critically acclaimed Spider-Man Life Story. Anyone who hasn't read it should check it out. You don't need to know anything about Spider-Man to enjoy Spider-Man Life Story. You actually don't need anything. You don't need to know anything about the backstory of Jason Todd and Batman to understand Teardrops. You can read this. You can go into this cold. And you can understand just the way this scene is told that, okay, well, Batman understands. This is Jason Todd asking for help from clearly the only father he's really known in his life, and that's Batman. And very poignant scene. And you know what? I don't even know why Mr. Freeze is part of this. I can't even remember Mr. Freeze being in last issue. This entire issue is all about the relationship between Jason Todd and Batman. I forgot all about the kid. This is about Jason Todd asking for help from Batman. And the way I never really saw the way that Zardasky scripts the interplay between the past of when Jason Todd defied Batman and went off to look for the Joker and ultimately got crowbarred to death and then died in the explosion, and Batman arrived too late. But in this case, Batman arrives on time. And, that poignant scene, the epic scene, one of the most epic scenes in the history of comics, is Batman holding a dead Robin in his arms, which is beautifully illustrated here by Eddie Burrows with Heber Ferreira. And when he ultimately saves Jason, and he tells, there's that scene where Jason's looking up, And he says, "You were here," and Batman looks down at him and says, "Always." So whether Jason Todd is alive or dead, Batman's always there. I thought that was just beautiful. It said a lot that no matter what, that whether life or death, Batman will be there. And no matter, even if he fails, he'll still be there. I thought this was powerful, especially if you're longtime Batman readers like you and I are, Chase. I thought this really resonated with me. This had an impact on me. And as a longtime reader, I forget that it was, what the hell was it, 25, 30 years ago that Death in the Family came out? It's a long time.
86 or 87.
Yeah. And it's
really
still,
long time ago.
It still resonates with me. And the callback here and the beautiful callback visually with the art. I mean, kudos to Burroughs and Fiera for making all this hit home. And then ultimately Batman, of course, being frozen at the end, putting himself probably at, no thought to his own safety, much to his detriment because he gets frozen by freeze. But anyways, very powerful tale. Finally, I just want to say, I feel like a fool for admitting this, but who is that character at the end? This new character with the smiley face on, yellow smiley face on his jacket. Is that a new character? Who is that?
Yeah, I have no idea. Maybe that's the Teardrops guy. No clue.
Well, maybe it is Teardrops guy because maybe this is a speculator alert. Is this new guy called Teardrops? But he's got a yellow, almost like twisted happy face on a leather jacket, and he's got a yellow paint on his face, and the smile on his face matches the smile on his jacket. It's very interesting new character, and maybe an interesting addition to maybe not Batman's Rogues Gallery. Maybe this is someone for Red Hood's Rogues Gallery. We'll have to wait and see. But overall, very impressed. And like I said, I couldn't argue with you if you were to insist that this is the best Batman title out.
Yeah, the guy does say it's an honor to finally meet you. So I think it is a new character. And to Rocky's point earlier about not needing to know anything, like there are those flashback scenes from Marcus Toe that do flash back to that Death in the Family storyline that sort of inform this, right? Like that's exactly the point that Rocky was making about, Oracle telling Batman, Jason asked for you. The whole point of the story in Death of the Family, when Jason Todd gets killed by the Joker, he was just waiting for Batman at that point to leave because he didn't need Batman's help and his plan all along was to not listen, even though Batman told him, don't take the Joker on by yourself. Yeah. That was always Jason Todd's plan. I'm just waiting for Batman to leave so I can go take care of things myself. I don't need his help. The young brashness of youth, right? And now all this time has gone by, and that's exactly what Jason Todd is asking.
Brilliant.
He would never ask. And so that was very poignant. But the part that got me was actually even the next page when Bruce makes that realization that Oracle has made about, yes, Jason Todd is finally asking for help. He says, damn it, son, I'm on my way. I won't let you. And then he doesn't finish because he's thinking back because he's probably thinking, I won't let you die or I won't let you fall or won't let you get hurt, whatever his thought was going to be to finish that. And then he realizes, but he already has, right? He already did let him down when he died the first time, which again, yeah, you're right. This is fantastic. And one last thing I'll mention before we move on to the next story. A lot of people forget that Death in the Family storyline, or I'll just ask it this way. Do you know who it was written by, Rocky? Do you remember?
Oh man.
It's somebody that is very, very well known worldwide now, I would say, for a different character.
Oh, man.
Jim Starlin.
Oh, yes.
That was during Jim Starlin's run.
You just did an interview with him, too.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of people don't realize that, Jim Starlin, he's not just an artist, he's a writer as well. And he had a decent run on Batman, and he was part of that story. Although you remember, it was for people that aren't familiar, was DC put in the back of part 3, the issue, they put 2 phone numbers and you called in and you voted if you wanted him to live or you wanted him to die. And so Starlin had 2 different, it wasn't like Starlin just decided he wanted to kill Robin, wanted to kill Jason Todd. The readers voted. And if I remember correctly, it was less than 50 votes that decided, might even been less than 5. I don't know. It was a very, very small margin.
Yeah. Just some useless information. I did vote and I voted to kill Jason Todd. I phoned in from Canada, from Southern Alberta. I phoned and I voted. I didn't like Jason Todd. I was.
A lot of people didn't.
I didn't like him. I didn't like him. I thought he was unlikable. I never liked Jason Todd. And I'll be
Which
honest,
to
I
me,
never liked Jason Todd. I've never liked Jason Todd even up until he got his own, until Red Hood and the Outlaws, when I started to like him again. But I never liked Jason Todd. I
yeah,
wanted him
a lot
dead,
of
and I
people,
never lost sleep over it. I never lost sleep over him dying.
yeah, a lot of people felt that way. A lot of fans felt that way. It was the whole reason they came up with the idea, especially following the kind of golden child of Dick Grayson. But here's what I don't understand: I don't like Damien, and Jason Todd was, yeah, he was a little unlikable. He got on my nerves at times, but I didn't dislike him as much as I disliked Damien. But yet Damien was a dick, like way further along on the dickhead scale than Jason Todd, but somehow he was revered for that. Like it was like he went so far over that it was satirical, and he was like, oh well, that's just Damien. I don't understand why Damien gets a pass, and Jason Todd got killed. Although Damien got killed, but they brought him back,
Yeah.
and then he got killed again in the Robin #1, and they brought him back. So I guess Damien's been killed twice. But it would be nice to leave him dead for a while. But I digress. Anyway, let's move on to the next story. It's that Nightwing story that I mentioned. Cameron Johnson writing, penciled by Leosa McKizzy, inked by Trevor Scott, colored by Andrew Dahlhaus. It's a fun story. The art is really spectacular. I think colors especially. There's a few different palettes. It's Batwing going after Riddler, or Batwing going after Riddler. And it kind of shows Luke Fox's intelligence here. He's able to solve the riddles that the Riddler is posing to him, and in the Riddler's own words, faster than Batman's able to solve them. So I don't know if this is just they decided to tell this one-of story about Luke Fox Batwing to remind us how smart he really is and how kind of formidable he is as a fighter. He ends up taking on Killer Croc, and then makes a deal with Croc, and ends up actually sicking Croc on the Riddler. So there's not a lot of huge substance here, but it is a fun story, and the art is really great. And other than reminding us how smart and formidable Batwing is, I'm not sure what the point of this story is, but I'm glad it's here because it's like the first thing I thought when I saw the first page. I'm like, oh my god, it's Batwing. Right? It's been a while since I've seen Luke Fox like fully decked out as Batwing, and I did enjoy that series, especially when Luke Fox took over, and Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray were writing it. And I was like, it's great to see Batwing back in costume and working with Oracle. So I did enjoy the story. I just wonder about any sort of long-term implications that it might have.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's funny. You said it was Batwing, and I, I have to admit, I read this and I just saw Batman. I assumed it was a bat. I thought it was Jason's a Batman story, but you're absolutely right. It's a Batwing, and I'm just reading it. I just read Batman whenever. Yeah, but yeah, I know it's a Batwing story, but yeah, but I agree with you. I think it's the I would say the same thing as you, that I thought this was almost a pointless story, but then that's a little bit unfair because there's virtually every Batman story in Batman Black and White is a pointless Batman story because it doesn't seem to have a longer narrative. It doesn't seem, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't reveal much. At least here, it's nice to have a Batwing. It is nice to have, frankly, a Jace story just to get more background on him because we need to build up his character, build up
Well,
his
no, this is Luke. Well, that's no that. So
This is
Luke
Tim?
is Batwing. Yeah, so that's the whole point. It's Batwing, which is Luke, not
Luke.
Tim or Jace, whatever he goes
Oh, yeah.
by, who's the next Batman.
Sorry,
Because
it's Luke.
that's the first thing. Like I saw the costume, I'm like, hey, isn't that Batwing? And then when Oracle talks, the first thing she says is Luke. You're right
Yeah.
above the drop-in point.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so this is Luke Fox, who in the pages of Future State Gotham has apparently given up the Batwing identity and doesn't know that Jace or Tim is the next Batman.
Yeah.
So yeah, wondering why this story is here.
Yeah.
Is it because is Luke going to take up the mantle of Batwing again, or is it just to remind us, just to keep the trademark? I don't know.
Yeah, and yeah, that's exactly right. The Fox family sure is amazing. I mean, what a Batman legacy. I mean, the true Batman legacy has nothing to do with Bruce Wayne or any of his wards, but no, it's all Lucius Fox. I mean, you and I had a debate about Lucius Fox earlier in this podcast, And it's clear that, between Luke Fox and Tim / Jace Fox, we got Batwing and we got the new Batman. And why did we need this story? I don't really know. I will say this. I thought it was very forced. As a story, I think the major weakness is that there is no motivation for Killer Croc. Killer Croc, he changed his allegiances for no reason whatsoever that I could see. He was working for Riddler, and then for whatever reason, he got pissed off at the Riddler and then decided to change his mind and then attack the Riddler. And that was only when he realized he was going to get his ass kicked by Batwing. This is really, as a story, this wasn't very good, to be blunt. Other than establishing the fact that, sure, okay, Luke Fox is very smart and intelligent, and he can decipher a riddle. Well, so could the reader. I mean, even I figured out the one. Usually, full disclosure, most of the Batman riddles I can never figure out. I always got to jump ahead to be told what the answer is because I don't have the patience to figure them out myself. These ones I actually figured out on my own, which tells me that, I should watch what I say. I just thought that this story maybe, I thought this was definitely a filler story. This was a filler story. I love Batwing, by the way. I have all the issues. Jimmy Palmiotti wrote most of the entire run, the original Batwing, which took place in the setting in Africa, I think it was, and then Luke Fox became Batwing. I got all those issues. I love it. So I love the character. It's good to see him again, but like you, I'm a little bit confused. What's DC trying to say? Are we gonna keep Batwing? Are we gonna have Batwing fighting alongside his older brother Jace as Batman? Batwing v Batman as partners? I don't know. What are they teasing here? But it's definitely it piques my interest as to what the future might hold.
Yep, agreed. The next story is that Tim Drake story, as I mentioned. Apparently, there's somebody who's been going around kidnapping kids. Like, wait, isn't this the Nightwing storyline? Yeah, apparently, very, very similar. So there's somebody called the Chaos Monster, which makes his first appearance in this issue and actually kidnaps Tim's friend Bernard. So again, Megan Fitzsimmons, who wrote this, she's clearly pulling in her love and knowledge of Tim Drake's run as Robin, because Bernard Dowd was last seen in Robin Volume 2, number 140. We're told by the editor and little editor's note there. So again, just like the Future State Robin Eternal storyline, Megan Fitzsimmons' knowledge of Tim Drake as Robin and her love for Tim Drake as Robin is very clear here. But there's more going on in the subtext of the story besides just Tim Drake trying to solve this mystery. He's having a little bit of a tough time, and maybe that's why he reached out to somebody from his past and met up with Bernard Dowd to kind of remember who he used to be. And Bernard even sort of he mentions that. He refers to that. He talks about how Tim Drake was always the smartest and most driven person in the class, because when he asks Tim what he's doing, he doesn't really have an answer. He's not sure, and Bernard is sort of surprised by that, and Tim puts it in his terms, which is computers, and he says, yeah, it's like my program has been corrupted, and it has been for a while, and I'm not sure how to fix it. And before they can continue the conversation, that's when the Chaos Monster shows up, knocks out Tim Drake, and kidnaps Bernard. So what's going on with these kidnappings? What's going on with Tim Drake? Again, I'll ask the question, does this lead into a Tim Drake Robin series? Because again, Damian's off the table right now, and that's referenced as well early on the first page when Tim Drake's talking to Oracle, and she said, I don't even know what to call you. Are you going by a code name? I'm not going to call you Drake, which thank God, because that was when I heard he was getting a new code name in the pages of Young Justice from Brian Michael Bendis. I was worried because I don't trust Bendis to come up with good names for characters, i.e. Rogolzar. But calling him Drake. So for those not familiar, I guess that's the proper term for a male duck. And apparently they can be quite aggressive. So I'm sorry, that just is a dumb name. Drake? All I can think of is Drake's Coffee Cakes. You're going to name your superhero after a coffee cake?
It was also the name of the Earth 3 it was Earth 3 counterpart. in
exactly.
Young Justice is what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, just a terrible name. Just either call him Robin or Red Robin. Like if I had my way, he would be Robin and Damian would be dead. But that's another that's another podcast altogether. But yeah, he can go back to being Red Robin. I'm fine with that. But definitely not Drake. And so I'm glad Oracle, Barbara Gordon, and I agree on that. But overall, I enjoyed the story. I thought the art by Belen Ortega was really solid. And when I first started reading Batman, I mean, not to date myself, but Dick Grayson was Robin, but not for very long. It was only a couple years, and he moved away, and Teen Titans, and then Tim Drake or Jason Todd rather showed up, and we just talked about his whole journey. But for the majority of my comic reading life, while I was in high school and college, it was Tim Drake. I do kind of consider him the Robin that I enjoyed the most. And I might be a little older. I think most Tim Drake fans, most people that say, yeah, Tim Drake's my Robin, tend to be a little younger than me. But I don't know anybody who says, oh, Jason Todd was my Robin, just because he, like you said, he wasn't very likable. So it's kind of strange. So I kind of lump myself in and with those younger people that are like about 10 years younger than me that consider Tim Drake their Robin. Tim Drake is the Robin, is the character that I enjoyed the most. He found out who Batman was on his own. He was really smart, maybe smarter than Batman himself, as he was written sometimes. And he had that long running series that I think was spectacular. Most of it with Tom Grummett art that was amazing. So, if we're going to get Tim Drake in a Robin story, being called Robin and sort of searching for himself, I'm all for it. What I hope doesn't happen is at the end of this, I hope he doesn't get some new costume and some other lame code name. Because maybe that's the whole point of the series, right? Because you can't have him be Robin because Damian's Robin. But I sort of feel like Megan Fitzsimmons loves Tim Drake enough that won't be the case. But I guess we'll see. Anyway, what did you think of this one, Rocky?
Well, I liked it. One of the reasons why I liked it is that it identified one of the questions that I think many of us readers have. At least I certainly do, and dare I be arrogant enough to suggest that other readers might have similar questions that I have. That Tim Drake sort of disappeared. He originally was killed. We thought he was killed, right? Like remember that it was in Rebirth where Tim Drake he was on his way to Ivy Town University. He was leaving the Batman. He was no longer going to be Robin. He was leaving the Bat fold, and all the members of the Bat family, especially Batman, were so proud of him because in many ways Batman thought that he was the most intelligent out of all of them. And he broke away from the life of being a Batman, and he was being a member of the Batman family per se, a crime fighter, and he was doing his own thing. He was using his brilliance to genuinely move forward to help the world and go off to university. And sky was the limit for Tim Drake, but then he was killed. And there was that, oh my God, Tim Drake is dead. And then when he comes back, we get him in Future State, right? Well, first we got him in Young Justice, which was a disaster because Bendis didn't know what to do with him. Then Bendis made it worse by confusing him with with an Earth 3 Tim Drake. And then the Drake fiasco was horrible. Then, of course, we get Future State Tim Drake, where he's immortal. He becomes immortal. He becomes doused in Lazarus liquid in Future State. And we know that he ultimately becomes immortal. We're not in Future State yet. This is pre-Future State. We know that Tim Drake is ultimately going to be doused with Lazarus liquid and become essentially immortal. But here he is pre-Future State, and he's trying to find his way. He's questioning himself. He's now second-guessing himself. Apparently, he doesn't want to go to university anymore. Well, if he doesn't want to go to university, what does he actually want to do? And this is a guy he's trying to find himself again. He's second guessing himself. Does he want to go to university? Doesn't he? And as you alluded to, Chase, that's why he wants to talk to his friend Bernard and to try to get a handle on things. So in a way, he's got questions about his own life. He's uncertain as to what his future might hold, which is a question that a lot of young adults have nowadays. So this is timely. And in this particular world right now, millennials are asking themselves a lot of questions. And so is Tim Drake here. So this is very well played. I think it works very well. And ultimately, I agree with you that the writing here is quite good. I mean, I got to give credit to Fitzpatrick and Megan Fitzpatrick. She does a good job. Belen Ortega as the art does a very good job. I'm interested into what choices Tim Drake is going to make, because we need to get to know Tim Drake again, because, he's back in full force, and now he's back. And is he going to remain a member of the Bat family? Well, he is wearing the Robin suit, isn't he? And he doesn't want to be called he doesn't want to be called Drake. So he's wearing something with an R on the chest, and he's talking to a person named Oracle. So it certainly seems like this guy wants to be Robin. If something looks and quacks like a duck, let's call it a Robin. All right? I mean, come on. So I'm really intrigued by this. Tim Drake is a lot of people's favorite Robin. Mine is Damien, because I like the narcissistic little bastard. But Tim Drake, there's something about Tim Drake that he's the common man's Robin. There's a reason why people like him. And this story by Megan Fitzmartin just sort of drives home why that's the case.
Yeah, I agree. The best thing about her writing is she clearly has love for Tim Drake, so that definitely works. All right, well, moving on to the last story. I mentioned it up top. It's the Matthew Rosenberg Grifter story, The Long Con. This is the next to last or penultimate part of that story, and we see Grifter months ago. The story starts off talking to somebody and saying, "Yeah, Leviathan approached me about working for them," and so clearly this is tying in with Leviathan. There's some bigger mystery that goes to the story of The Long Con. Matthew Rosenberg continues to give us the best characterization of Coal Cash or Grifter that we've had. And he outright says it, right? He has one of the characters say it in the issue, the way that Matthew Rosenberg himself sees Grifter and the way he portrays him. So I think her name's Athena, right? That's the head of security for Wayne Enterprises under Lucius Fox, and she says, "He seems as dumb as a bag of hammers, but he's really good at this."
That's Adibi. That's Chance Adibi.
Aditi, that's right. Chance. That's Adibi. What I was thinking. Not Athena. Yeah, Chance. So I love that. That's exactly the way Matthew Rosenberg writes Grifter. He seems as dumb as a bag of hammers, but he's really good at this. So, he comes across as not knowing what he's doing or flying by the seat of his pants, but it's clear that everything that's happened up to this point, for the most part, he has sort of expected, and he's been preparing for, and he's maneuvered things around in place to do whatever it is that he's trying to do. Now, he's not Batman, right? So as much as he can plan and try,
no, he's not.
So there's a few things that don't go quite his way, and when he tries through, so he hires Deathstroke to basically kick his ass. So Deathstroke and Grifter are fighting, and the reason that that's being done is because Grifter knows that Batman hates Deathstroke and Batman hates Grifter, so Batman will definitely show up to a Deathstroke Grifter fight and try to capture them both. And that's the way that Grifter's then going to capture Batman and prevent Batman from interfering whatever it is that Grifter needs to do. That's sort of the main goal of this con. But unbeknownst to Grifter, Bruce Wayne wants to show up at this party that Lucius Fox is having. And so when he becomes aware of this Deathstroke Grifter fight, he calls in a pinch hitter to show up instead of going there himself. And so this little containment thing, whatever it is that Grifter has built, instead of capturing Batman and holding him overnight, like Grifter was hoping that would originally happen, he's actually captured Superman. And Grifter, as we know, is no match for Superman. And so he does what any sane person would do in this situation, and he runs and he tries to escape and tries to get teleported away from Superman. We also get a really cool Zealot cameo, because ultimately, as Grifter's not able to get away from Superman, he has to call in some backup to make sure Lucius Fox is okay and is not killed by these Leviathan hitmen. And so he calls in his old friend Zealot, or Z rather. She prefers not to be called the Zealot. And so again, it's establishing more Wildstorm characters in the Marvel or in the DC universe rather. And it's Matthew Rosenberg giving wonderful characterization to bag of hammers, or Grifter, if you prefer that nickname. The art by Ryan Benjamin is top notch, like it's been throughout. The pacing, the smart dialogue, the color work. Yeah, like this is my favorite story. The Grifter story has been my favorite story in Batman Urban Legends since the first issue. Like Zardasky's is great as well, but if I have to pick one, I'm picking the Grifter story because not only is it accurate in terms of characterization for Grifter, but it's also Rosenberg brings a level of humor to the story that is just awesome. It reminds us that comics are fun and big and over the top. There's plenty of action. Certainly in this one with Superman there trying to take out Grifter, and you can totally tell that Superman's holding back. You know, he doesn't see Grifter as an out and out villain. And yeah, the characterization is just fantastic. Even the characterization at the end between the interaction and interplay between Batman and Superman. When Batman says, "I got this," you know. So he's like, do you know where Grifter is? Well, not yet. Well, maybe Superman's, maybe we should work together. No. Superman saying, you're underestimating him. He's dangerous. Like, you know what? I can handle Grifter. Go back to Metropolis, Clark. This is my problem. So, you know, again, it's perfect characterization for these characters. Great art. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Love this Long Con story. And God, I mean, I've heard so many people, seen so many people on social media, on Twitter, saying they want a Matthew Rosenberg Grifter story, Grifter series. I really hope DC is listening because Matthew Rosenberg, he likes, you know, he'll put a like on that if you tweet it out, and he'll retweet it. So it's clear that he has a desire to continue telling Grifter stories. And
I so agree with you, man. Fantastic.
Yeah, there needs to be a Rosenberg Grifter series, ongoing series, 100%.
Matthew Rosenberg understands his character, and you know what? And as a further compliment to Matthew Rosenberg, I don't read a lot of Marvel titles, but every time, you know, I picked up a lot of his issues when he wrote Hawkeye at Marvel, and when he wrote Winter Soldier and Hawkeye in over at Marvel. And he's just good at it. And he even wrote, I think he had a run on the Punisher too. That was quite good. And he's really good at imbuing humor, dark humor in these types of situations. And he's a perfect fit. He's a perfect fit for Grifter. And you know what? I laughed out loud. There's nothing better than when you're reading a comic and then you get to pause or spit out your drink because you're laughing. There's a scene here where Superman, Grifter's thinking he's captured Batman in this tank, and he's given this big rehearsed speech to Batman about, how you're not going to escape from this tank. You've only got so many hours of air, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, all of a sudden, smash, one arm pops out of the tank. It's Superman. And you know that he obviously screwed up as Grifter often does. And I love the line by Superman, as Superman says, as he sighs and says, every time I come to Gotham, it's something. It's just like, you can, especially for us longtime readers, because for longtime readers of Batman, all of us know that Batman can't stand when another superhero comes to Gotham. It's my city. I'll protect it. Stay the hell out. And Batman feels particularly sensitive when Superman crops in on his turf. Let's face it, Superman can make Batman look stupid, right? Batman would have been trapped in that tank for longer than Superman was. We can all agree on that. Batman would have found a way to escape, but Superman, let's face it, Superman is very helpful, but Batman always refuses to admit that. And it's really great here how Superman is used here, but Superman is an afterthought in this story. And even Grifter gets the best of Superman. He keeps Superman at bay because he's creating, as Superman is chasing Grifter, Grifter's is intentionally putting other lives in danger, knowing that they're not really in danger, that it'll distract Superman to save these other lives. So Grifter gets closer and closer, and he's contacting the Zealot Z to ultimately protect Lucius Fox and to protect Chance Adibi at the party that they're at, where that Bruce Wayne is at. And the dialogue here is just spot on. It's so funny. It's so entertaining. It's so well done. the interaction between Deathstroke and the Grifter is so good. You know, the moment Superman breaks out of that propane tank or whatever the hell he's in, you know, Deathstroke saying, "I'm out of here. I don't get paid enough for this." You know, it's just so well done. It's really great. I love the interaction. Chance is talking with Lucius, and Lucius wants to know how she found out all this information, and how does she know that Grifter, you know, stole her laptop or got information off her laptop. Of course, they slept together in the previous issue. She doesn't want to let Lucius Fox know that, so they're dancing around the obvious, and this is like a comedic, but yet kind of serious and interesting James Bond comic book. It's fun. This is fun, and in fact, I collect Dynamite's James Bond stories, the comic book James Bond written by Dynamite, and I wish it was as entertaining as this. Some of it's pretty good. Don't get me wrong, but this to me, my God, this is what I want an espionage comic book to be like: funny, entertaining, and action packed. This has all the bells and whistles, and yeah, I mean, and let me just say this: for fans of the Wildstorm universe, we got Marlowe, we got the Zealot, we got the Grifter. This is the Wildstorm universe coming into the DC universe full bore here, and this is something that was unanticipated. So I think with this new DC Omniverse, we might be getting more of the Wildstorm universe characters coming in here, and this is a good thing, because those are very interesting characters. The Zealot Z is a particularly interesting character. So
yeah, I agree. Not enough of and I don't understand. These are good characters. I don't understand why they've had such a hard time integrating them into the DC universe overall. So
yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah. Anyway, there are some other books that came out this week that we're not going to cover because we're all pushing 3 hours here. But just to remind everybody, we've got the DC Pride #1, which I would have liked to talk about, but that's another 80-page this giant with 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 stories in it, and we just don't have time to cover it all here. But that is out there, and maybe if we have time, we'll do a separate episode on that. We also have the next to last issue of American Vampire, and when I say last, I mean this is supposed to be the final story in the American Vampire universe. I think I mistakenly said issue 8 was the last one, and I was disappointed that I hadn't read it. I've started reading American Vampire from the first volume. I'm hoping to get all caught up and read the entire American Vampire storyline and series by the time issue 10 comes out, so we can talk about issue 10 when it drops. But issue 9 is out this week, American Vampire number 1976, or rather American Vampire 1976 number 9 from Scott Snyder and Raphael Albuquerque. There's also Far Sector number 12, which wraps up that maxi series with Joe Mullen. And same thing, neither Rocky or I are caught up on it. I think I've only read the first 3 issues, so that's something I'm going to try to read, and we'll do a spotlight on that separately later on down the line because, again, just too many books this week to fit it all into this episode. So, again, we hope you all enjoyed this. We appreciate your support. Anything you want to plug, Rocky, that is coming out this week?
Well, I am going to say I'll mention the Far Sector. The Far Sector character of Jo Mullein, who is the Green Lantern. She is a member of the LGBT community. That it will be revealed at the end of Far Sector number 12, and that she also has a full 1-page spread in the pages of DC Pride, and so that's very interesting. And for again, it is DC Pride week, so we should give a call out to all LGBTQ characters and to celebrate that this week, or I guess it's this entire month. And yeah, I've got I did read having read DC Pride, I can say that I think that it's quite clear, by the way, that the Extrano character, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Extrano character, who is the first gay character introduced in DC Comics, he's basically DC's new Doctor Strange. He's a character that appears in DC Pride. I think, speculator alert, pick up DC Pride, people. He's definitely going to be a character that we're going to be seeing more of in the DC universe, because he looks like Doctor Strange. I mean, for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, he looks wildly different. So that's not his first appearance. He looks wildly different than he's looked in the past. So I
Yeah,
don't know what that's about.
they're treating him a lot more seriously. He's definitely more mature. He's treated and written more like a seasoned hero here. There's no question about it that you can just tell when you read his portrayal in DC Pride. They're elevating him. He's being elevated here, and I think that's a good thing because, quite frankly, by the way, I think it's such an obvious ripoff of Doctor Strange. It's ridiculous. I mean, even the costume I thought was, I think, fairly was oddly enough similar in many ways. But in any event, DC Pride is a surprisingly interesting book. And by the way, if those of you who like GLQ, you might have heard during the DC round robin, there was voting for a Justice League queer, and some people thought that was kind of a joke. You and I joked about it. Why would people get together just because they're queer and form a superhero team? It's a little bit silly. Well, this was actually in the Pride, DC Pride. It's during a Pride parade where bad guys attack a Pride parade, and of course, LGBTQ members of the superhero community happen to be present, and they jokingly refer to themselves as JLQ while they take down the bad guys, and so that's where the JLQ comes from. So it's a little bit more justified and not as silly as maybe it first sounded. So in any event, it's actually well worth picking up. I thought it was a nice range and a nice sort of snapshot of LGBTQ members in the DC superhero community.
Yeah, that Extraño thing is pretty interesting to me because he has his look has evolved over the. This isn't the first time shown up. So he appeared way back in the event in 1988 called Millennium. That's where he first showed up, and yeah, Joe Staton art, very stylized, had a long nose and like a handlebar mustache and kind of this. He was depicted as having a much darker complexion. I think he's Brazilian or something like that. Definitely from somewhere in South America. And he spoke with an accent. Now he's much more, I don't know, anglicized here. I don't know that I like that. But yeah, could be that they're raising his profile for him to show up in some other things. So yeah, like I said, hopefully Rocky and I are going to have time to do a separate episode on the DC Pride, and we'll have a separate episode reviewing all 12 of the Far Sector books, as a complete series, as a complete story. We'll let you know on that. As far as other things I have coming up, man, so many, it's hard to mention. Big news earlier this week. Yesterday, there's an interview with the creative team for Slow City Blues, which is a creator-owned comic that's not only launching, the comic itself is launching a new platform called Zoop, which is basically a platform that does all the heavy lifting for the creators so they have the freedom to just create. So there is another episode out today, Tuesday, as this is being released, an interview with the CEO of Zoop, where he explains exactly what they're offering for creators. And maybe what I'll say here, go listen to the episode, but maybe what I'll say here, you want to talk about putting your money where your mouth is. This company, Zoop, who basically will run the crowdfunding campaign and allow a creator to just create, they get paid on the back end, which means if the campaign is not successful, because it's like Kickstarter, it's all or nothing. If the campaign is not successful, if Zoop as a platform doesn't get your project funded, they don't get paid. So they are very invested in getting your project, if you're an aspiring comic creator, over the line and making sure. Now they're small and they're not just accepting everybody right now. Anybody who wants to run a crowdfunding campaign, they're going to vet you and make sure that your project is worth their time for exactly that reason, because they don't get paid unless the project is fully funded. So anyway, go check out that episode. Check out the episode from yesterday about Slow City Blues. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, you probably have a few hours left. There are a lot of Slow City Blues rewards and discounts for the first 48 hours and some like the David Finch version or Virgin cover, I think, is only available for the first 48 hours. So definitely go and check it out. Zoop.gg or wearezoop.com and go and check that out. Also have a Kickstarter spotlight this week coming for a project called Game of Doubles on Kickstarter. And we still have big news coming later this year, August 1st, we've got a big event planned, and it's very possible that that event is going to coincide with Terrificon, the best comic-centric comic convention in all of the United States. It happens at the Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. Most likely I'm going to be there. I'll know for sure by this time next week. Trevor, Dark Knight Nation, is also going to be there selling copies of his project, Area 51, the Helix Project. And if at all possible, if we can twist this Canadian guy's arm, he may be there as well.
I'm going to try. I'm trying.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, we appreciate your support. Pay attention. I'm going to have more announcements about that big event on August 1st, where there's going to be some big names involved. Nicholas Scott, Gail Simone, Scott Snyder. It's going to be a huge event and hopefully coincide with Terrificon at the Mohegan Sun. So again, we really appreciate everybody listening, especially for a marathon episode like this. And we'll talk to you next time.
All right. See you guys later.